Social proof exploitation. In 1968, a woman named Kitty Genovese was attacked right outside her apartment in New York. She screamed for help for nearly 30 minutes. Dozens of people either saw or heard what was happening, but no one helped. No one called the police. Everyone just assumed that someone else would step in. This chilling example shows something called social proof. It's a psychological tendency that runs so deep in us, it affects almost every choice we make. It's the urge to follow what the crowd is doing. If a lot of people believe or do something, we assume it must be the right thing. That's why people line up outside busy restaurants. It's why trends suddenly explode in popularity. It's also how false information can spread much faster than the truth. But when people start using social proof in manipulative ways, it turns into a powerful weapon. Advertisers use it all the time. They say things like, millions of people love this product, or it's the #1 bestseller, or everyone is switching to this new service. You may never have checked it yourself, but when you hear so many others supposedly approve, you just start trusting it automatically. Even just a few fake reviews online can be enough to convince someone to buy something. Scammers use this trick too. Have you ever seen a product with lots of glowing reviews that all sound strangely alike? Or a new cryptocurrency suddenly being hyped by dozens of accounts on social media? Or a sudden wave of posts all pushing a false story? These are all ways to create the illusion of popularity, to make something look trustworthy when it isn't. This is the same tactic used by cults, by Ponzi schemes, and even by propaganda machines. If you can convince people that everyone else is doing something, most of them will follow without question. But the real danger of social proof isn't just about advertising. It's about how it can control people's behavior in groups. Studies show that the more people see an emergency happening, the less likely anyone is to help. This is called the bystander effect. Everyone just assumes someone else will take care of it. In more extreme cases, social proof can lead to mob behavior. A person who would never hurt anyone on their own might do something violent in a crowd because it feels acceptable in that moment. Our sense of morality gets outsourced. If nobody is stopping it, we think it must be okay. And here's the disturbing part. It doesn't take much to activate social proof. Just a few fake opinions, a couple of paid followers, a carefully timed trend, and suddenly the illusion becomes reality. Once it looks like something is widely accepted, even the skeptics start to follow. The scariest thing is that most people won't even realize they've been manipulated. They'll follow the crowd and feel like they made the decision on their own. Number 2, fear-mongering. Fear is one of the oldest and most powerful forms of control. It shuts down logic, crushes independent thinking, and turns people into obedient followers. When someone is scared, they don't stop to think. They just want to feel safe. That's what makes fear-mongering and anxiety manipulation so dangerous. History is full of times when fear was used to control whole communities. One of the most famous examples? The Salem witch trials in the late 1600s. An entire town was consumed by paranoia. People believed that witches were hiding among them. The fear got so intense that neighbors turned on each other. Accusations spread like fire. Logic disappeared. People confessed to crimes they didn't commit, just to avoid being killed. And those who didn't confess were sentenced to death anyway. Fear didn't just control them. It made them destroy each other. And you don't need a witch hunt for fear to work. A manipulative boss can keep employees terrified of losing their jobs, so they stay quiet. An abusive partner can make someone believe the outside world is too dangerous, so they never leave. Politicians and media outlets use fear all the time. They say disaster is right around the corner, that your way of life is under attack, and that only they can protect you. The more scared you are, the more power they gain. That's because fear hijacks your brain. When you're anxious, your amygdala, the part of the brain that handles threats, kicks in. It sends your brain into survival mode. Your logical thinking shuts down. You become focused only on escaping the danger. And in that moment, whoever offers a way out, a leader, a product, an idea, becomes your lifeline. That's why fear-based marketing works so well. These ads don't just sell a product, they sell protection. Without this cream, you'll age faster. Without this insurance, you'll lose everything. Without this security system, your home isn't safe. First, they create fear. Then they sell you the solution. And the scariest part, fear-based manipulation doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like someone just looking out for you, like being prepared, like taking precautions. But if someone is always feeding your fears, keeping you anxious, and then offering themselves as the only solution, Step back, ask why. Because when fear stops being a warning and becomes a leash, someone else is holding the other end. Number 3, guilt tripping. There's a way to control someone without ever raising your voice, making a threat, or giving a command. You don't have to yell or argue. All you have to do is make them feel guilty. Guilt tripping and shame are incredibly powerful psychological tools. They can turn people into puppets, and they won't even realize it's happening. The victim believes they're doing things out of free will, but in reality, their emotions are being pulled like strings. Think about it. How many times have you done something, not because you wanted to, but because you felt bad saying no? Maybe you helped someone even though you were exhausted. Maybe you apologized when you weren't really at fault. Maybe you stayed in a toxic relationship because leaving would have made you feel like a bad person. That's guilt tripping in action, and it's terrifyingly effective. It usually starts when the manipulator plants a tiny seed of guilt, by twisting the truth just a little to make you feel responsible for their suffering. A parent sighs, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me?" A friend says, "I guess I just don't matter to you anymore." A partner says, "I gave up so much for us, and you're just walking away?" They don't tell you what to do. They don't have to. The guilt does all the work. But guilt alone doesn't always do the trick. That's where shame comes in. Guilt says, "You did something bad." Shame says, "You are bad." It's not, "You forgot my birthday." It's, "You're a terrible friend." It's not, "You made a mistake at work." It's, "You're completely useless." Once someone internalizes shame, they stop standing up for themselves. They don't just feel like they made a mistake, they feel like they are the mistake. That's the ultimate form of control. Cults, abusive partners, manipulative bosses, they all use this tactic. If you can convince someone that they're flawed, that they owe you, that they're never quite good enough, they'll stay, they'll apologize. They'll try harder to earn approval that's never really coming. And here's the most frightening part. Guilt tripping doesn't always come from other people. Over time, we learn to do it to ourselves. We hear those voices so often that they become our own. "I shouldn't say no. I should be a better person. I don't deserve to be happy." Once someone starts shaming themselves, the manipulation is complete. No one else has to control them. They're doing it on their own. So how do you break free? Start by seeing the pattern. Ask yourself, am I doing this because I truly want to? Or because I'm scared of being seen as selfish, ungrateful, or disappointing? Am I accepting blame that doesn't belong to me? Am I constantly chasing approval that always seems just out of reach? Once you question the guilt, you take away its power. Because the truth is, no one else gets to decide your worth. And the moment you stop playing their game, the spell breaks. Number 4, emotional blackmail. This psychological trick is so powerful, it can make people betray their values, stay in toxic relationships, and feel completely stuck in their lives. It's not hypnosis, it's not mind control, it's something worse. And the scariest part? Most people don't even realize it's happening to them. Picture this. A mother says, "If you move away, I don't know how I'll survive." A partner says, "If you really loved me, you wouldn't question me." A friend says, "After all I've done for you, you owe me." These aren't just guilt trips. They're calculated strategies. This is emotional blackmail, a form of manipulation where someone uses your emotions against you to get what they want. They don't ask, they don't beg. They make you feel like saying no would be cruel or selfish or even dangerous. And before you know it, you're doing things you never agreed to, because saying no feels impossible. This tactic isn't just used by individuals. Whole organizations, groups, and movements are built on emotional blackmail. Take organized crime, for example. Mafia leaders don't just use threats. They use loyalty, family, and unspoken debts. They'll do you a favor, act generous. But there's always a hidden rule. If you don't return the favor, it's betrayal. And suddenly walking away doesn't just feel risky, it feels morally wrong. But you don't need the mafia for this to happen. It shows up in relationships, where one person threatens to leave if they don't get what they want. In families, where one member controls everyone with guilt or silence. At work, where employees feel bad for setting boundaries. And it always follows the same pattern. First, the manipulator makes a demand. Then they create guilt, fear, or obligation. Finally, they offer a way out. Just do what I want, and everything will be fine. And just like that, you're trapped. Not because you can't say no, but because saying no feels like it will ruin everything. So how do you break free? The first step is to recognize it. If someone uses your own emotions against you, take a step back. If setting a boundary leads to threats, guilt, or punishment, you're being manipulated. And the key to breaking free isn't to argue, explain, or justify, it's to refuse to play the game. Here's the harsh truth. Emotional blackmailers don't want love, they don't want fairness. They don't want respect, they want control. And the moment they realize they can't control you anymore, they'll either escalate their tactics or go find their next victim. Number 5, love bombing. At first, it feels like something out of a romance movie. The attention is thrilling. The affection is overwhelming. You feel like you finally found someone who truly sees you, who gets you. They shower you with compliments, send nonstop messages, tell you that you're special, and that they've never met anyone like you. It's intense, exciting, almost too perfect. And that's because it is. This is called love bombing, a psychological trick meant to make you emotionally dependent before the person suddenly pulls away. It's not about real love. It's a setup, a carefully planned illusion. Love bombing works by taking over the brain's reward system. When someone overwhelms you with positive attention, your brain releases dopamine, the same chemical involved in addiction. You get an emotional high that feels impossible to walk away from. And that's exactly the goal. In romantic relationships, this might look like big, expensive gifts, rushing into intimacy, or declaring love after just a few days. In friendships or work environments, it might be instant connection, constant praise, and intense flattery that doesn't feel real. But the real trick isn't in the overload, it's in what happens after. Once the victim is emotionally hooked, the affection suddenly disappears. The sweet messages stop, the warmth fades, compliments turn into silence, or even into criticism. Suddenly, the person who once made you feel like the most important person in the world pulls away. And you're left wondering what went wrong. And here's where the manipulation really starts. Instead of seeing the pattern, the victim often blames themselves. They overthink every conversation, lower their boundaries, and try harder to fix what they think they did wrong. They chase after the affection, not realizing that the perfect beginning wasn't real at all. This cycle, intense affection followed by sudden coldness, is a psychological trap. It's called intermittent reinforcement, the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. You never know when the love will return, so you keep trying, putting up with worse and worse treatment, just to feel that early rush again. Narcissists use this in relationships. Cult leaders use it to keep followers loyal. Toxic workplaces use it to control employees. The emotional roller coaster becomes so intense that the victim doesn't even notice how much control they've lost. And by the time they finally see the truth, they're usually already exhausted, isolated, and unsure of their own instincts. Number 6, mind control. What if I told you that your thoughts, your beliefs, your opinions, even your memories could be changed without you even noticing? What if someone right now was shaping your mind to suit their goals? Without force, without obvious signs, just by using quiet, well-planned influence? Sounds like science fiction, right? But it's real, and it happens more than you think. Take the Stanford prison experiment, one of the most famous psychology experiments ever done. In 1971, researchers at Stanford University gathered 24 ordinary students. They randomly made some of them guards and the others prisoners in a fake jail. No one was forced, no one was brainwashed, and yet, within just a few days, the guards, just regular students, became cruel, authoritarian, and even abusive. They humiliated the prisoners, forced them into painful positions, and denied them basic needs. And the prisoners, they mentally and emotionally collapsed. They started accepting the abuse as if it were real. This happened not because anyone ordered it, but because of psychological erosion, the slow breakdown of a person's identity. The first step is isolation. When people are taken out of their normal environment, they become vulnerable. Their reality gets smaller. Their world becomes whatever the manipulator tells them. In the experiment, the prisoners weren't physically trapped, but mentally, they were completely stuck. And this doesn't only happen in studies or cults. It happens in governments, corporations, and even in unhealthy relationships. Control grows where questioning stops. The human brain looks for patterns, repetition, and things that feel familiar. If you hear the same thing over and over again, it starts to feel true, even if it's completely false. That's how propaganda spreads. That's why conspiracy theories gain followers. That's why people defend harmful beliefs, and then there's fear, the strongest tool of all. When people are scared, they look for safety, and the easiest way to control someone is to offer them certainty. Authoritarian leaders create fake enemies. Cult leaders predict the world will end. Toxic partners turn you against your own friends. The goal is always the same: keep you scared. Keep you dependent, keep you from thinking too much. Because when fear takes hold, your mind shuts down. You stop asking questions. And once that happens, the manipulator has full control. This is what makes this tactic so dangerous. It doesn't force you to change. It makes you want to. And by the time you notice what happened, if you ever do, it's already too late. Number 7, brainwashing. Today, we see many people so deeply brainwashed that they seem totally out of touch with reality. They believe things that don't make sense. They defend actions that are clearly wrong. They deny even the most obvious truths. But how does someone end up this way? What exactly is brainwashing? And what are the actual steps that cause such extreme changes in a person's mind? Brainwashing isn't just an idea from dark fiction stories. It's one of the most powerful psychological tools in human history. And the scary part is, no one is completely safe from it. One of the most terrifying real-life examples is the Jonestown Massacre. In 1978, over 900 people, including children, died after drinking poison, following the orders of cult leader Jim Jones. These weren't people who suddenly decided to follow a madman. They were slowly conditioned over time until they stopped thinking critically. They believed they were making their own choices. That's the power of brainwashing. It doesn't make you change, and it makes you want to. So how does it actually work? The process usually follows this pattern: isolation, destabilization, indoctrination, and reinforcement. Once this pattern takes hold, it becomes almost impossible to escape. The first step is isolation. If you control the information a person sees, you control how they understand the world. Jim Jones did this by moving his followers to a faraway jungle in Guyana, cutting them off from outside contact. In normal life, this happens with media bubbles, extremist communities, or toxic relationships, where only one point of view is constantly repeated. The more someone hears just one side of things, the less they question it. Next comes destabilization. This means breaking down someone's mental defenses. It's done through fear, confusion, and emotional exhaustion. Cults use long, tiring lectures, random punishments, and emotional pressure. Governments use endless crisis news and constant fear to make people feel like everything is too overwhelming, unless they follow authority. The more drained someone feels, the more they lean on the manipulator to make sense of things. Then comes indoctrination. This is where new beliefs are planted. It happens through patterns of rewards and punishments. If you go along with the group, you're praised. If you question things, you're punished. In cults, doubting the leader means being kicked out. In the real world, asking hard questions can lead to social rejection. Eventually, the brain is rewired. The new belief starts to feel normal, even if it was forced. Finally, there's reinforcement. Once the brainwashing is complete, the new identity is constantly supported by group rituals, shared beliefs, and loyalty. People stop questioning, because now their beliefs are part of who they are. They don't feel brainwashed, they feel awakened, and that's the most dangerous part. Brainwashing never feels like brainwashing when it's happening. It feels like you finally found the truth. That's why people stay in harmful groups. That's why mass manipulation works. That's why people follow extreme ideas without ever questioning them. How to protect yourself? So how can you protect yourself? The first step is to be aware. Brainwashing works by making it seem like critical thinking is either unnecessary or dangerous. If you ever feel pressure not to question something, that's a warning sign. The second step is to hear different sides. If you only ever listen to one point of view, you're being controlled, even if you don't notice it. And third, watch out for emotional manipulation, fear, guilt, outrage. These are tools used to shut down your logic. Whenever your emotions are being used to change your beliefs, stop and ask yourself, who gains from me thinking this way? Because once your mind is rewritten, you won't even realize it happened. Number 8, gaslighting. What happens if someone keeps telling you that you're crazy? At first, you'd push back. You know yourself. You trust your own mind. But over time, something changes. Maybe you are overreacting. Maybe you are too emotional. Maybe you're not thinking as clearly as you thought. And once enough doubt creeps in, you might start believing the one thing you never thought you would. Maybe they're right. This is called gaslighting. It's a psychological weapon meant to make you question your own reality. It's not just lying, it's replacing the truth with something more convenient for the manipulator. And the worst part, by the time you realize what's happening, if you realize you're already trapped. The word gaslighting comes from a 1944 film called Gaslight, where a husband slowly convinces his wife that she's going insane. He dims the lights in the house and then tells her nothing's changed. The goal? To make her doubt her senses so much that she becomes completely dependent on him. But this isn't just a movie plot. It's a real tactic used in abusive relationships, cults, politics, and even big corporations. Gaslighting works by attacking reality itself. It starts small. The manipulator denies things they clearly said or did. I never said that. You're making that up. At first, you argue. But after hearing the same denials again and again, you begin to doubt yourself. Then they go after your thinking ability. You're too sensitive. You always overanalyze everything. Eventually, you start thinking maybe you are the problem. Next comes emotional manipulation. Any feelings you have are dismissed. Why are you so emotional? You're always exaggerating. You begin to doubt your right to feel hurt or confused. Soon, you start apologizing for things that aren't your fault. And then comes the final step, isolation. Gaslighters don't want others helping you see clearly, so they slowly cut you off. They say your friends are toxic. Your family doesn't understand you. Little by little, they become your only source of truth. By this stage, they don't even need to manipulate you anymore. You do it yourself. You stop questioning. You silence your own doubts. You accept their version of reality. Not because you trust them, but because you no longer trust yourself. Gaslighting is terrifying because it doesn't just change what you think. It changes who you are. It makes you give up control over your own mind without even realizing it. And by the time you finally see it clearly, if you ever do, it feels impossible to escape. Because how can you fight back when you're no longer sure what's real? Number 9, hoovering. One of the most deceptive tricks in psychological manipulation doesn't come in the form of anger or threats. It doesn't push you away, it pulls you back in just when you're about to walk away. This is hoovering, a tactic used to suck you back into a toxic cycle right when you think you're finally free. The term comes from the Hoover vacuum cleaner, because the manipulator tries to vacuum you back in emotionally and mentally. It's a favorite tool of narcissists, emotional abusers, and manipulators who can't stand losing control. And it works so well because it feeds on hope, the hope that maybe this time things will be different. A clear example? Charles Manson and his cult. When his followers wanted to leave, he didn't always threaten them. Instead, he pulled them back with kindness, validation, and a sense of belonging. He made them feel special, irreplaceable, and convinced them that the outside world would never understand them like he did. His goal wasn't just to get them back, it was to make them willingly give up control again. So how does hoovering work? There are different forms. The love bomb hoover. The manipulator floods you with affection. They claim they've changed. They play your favorite songs, send nostalgic texts, and remind you of the good times. They become everything you ever wanted for as long as it takes to get you back. The pity hoover, if love doesn't work, they switch to guilt. They say they're depressed, sick, or going through something. They make you feel responsible for their pain. They won't beg, but they'll make you feel like a terrible person if you don't come back. The anger hoover, if guilt fails, they lash out. They blame you, call you cold or heartless. They try to make you jealous, posting how happy they are without you. But the goal isn't to move on, it's to get a reaction. Any reaction that keeps you emotionally hooked. Why does it work? Because the human brain craves closure. Every kind moment makes you forget the cruelty, and every cruel moment makes you miss the kindness again. It becomes a cycle, a loop of hope and disappointment. So how do you stop it? Recognize hoovering for what it is. It's not a real attempt to reconnect. It's a trick to pull you back under control. Cut off contact completely. Don't reply, don't explain. Not even a little. Remember this, hoovering only works if you respond. If you don't, the manipulator loses their power. Walking away is hard, but staying in the cycle, that's where the real danger lies. The only way to win is not to play. Number 10. Public shaming. For centuries, public shaming has been one of the most powerful ways to control people. It strips away dignity, isolates someone from their community, and turns them into a warning for others. Whether it's a medieval town, mocking someone in the stocks, or an online mob destroying someone's reputation, the psychology is the same. Public shaming isn't just about punishment, it's about breaking someone down until they believe they deserve it. One infamous example, the Salem witch trials of 1692. Innocent people, mostly women, were accused of witchcraft. They were forced to confess under pressure not because of real evidence, but because of fear, hysteria, and social pressure. Once the crowd turned against someone, their fate was sealed. Because when a mob forms, logic disappears. Why does this work? Because it triggers one of our deepest fears, social rejection. Humans are wired to survive in groups. Being cast out meant danger, even death in ancient times. Today, exile may not be physical, but public shame feels like death. It makes people feel alone, hated, and powerless. And it's not just big scandals, it happens everywhere. A boss mocks an employee in front of others. A teacher humiliates a student for a mistake. A partner shames their loved one in public. It's a power move to make the victim feel small, weak, and dependent on the person or group doing the shaming. Even worse, many victims try to regain approval from the very people who hurt them. They don't fight back, they try to earn back acceptance, making them even easier to control. And now, social media has supercharged this tactic. A single tweet, post, or clip can bring down a person in hours. Thousands of strangers act as judges and juries, piling on shame. The bigger the crowd, the less anyone feels personally responsible. It becomes a feeding frenzy. And once someone is labeled bad, the internet rarely forgives. But public shaming isn't just about punishing one person. It's about controlling everyone else. It sends a message. Step out of line, and this could happen to you. It keeps people quiet. Not because the rules are fair, but because the fear of humiliation is stronger than the desire to resist. How do you protect yourself? Recognize its purpose. It's not just about justice. It's a tool of fear and control. Don't feed it. If you're the target, don't give it power by accepting guilt that isn't yours. Stand your ground. The power of shame breaks the moment you stop believing you deserve it. Because the real trick of public shaming is this: it only works if you believe you deserve it. Stop believing and the spell is broken. Number 11, divide and conquer. Two people who once trusted each other completely now can't even look each other in the eye. They doubt each other. They argue. Not because of anything they did, but because someone wanted it that way. A rumor here, a half-truth there, small, well-timed actions used to drive a wedge between people. And once the wedge is deep enough, the one who caused it takes control. This is divide and conquer, a psychological strategy used for centuries to break apart unity so the manipulator can gain power. The goal? To make people so focused on fighting each other that they don't see who's really pulling the strings? History is full of it. The British Empire used this to keep control over colonies, turning local groups against each other so they wouldn't unite. Authoritarian rulers fueled division through politics, race, class, or social groups to stop people from rising up together. But it's not just about governments or history books, it happens every day. A manipulative boss creates drama between employees so no one feels safe enough to speak out. A toxic partner drives a wedge between you and your family, so they become your only source of love and truth. A narcissist spreads small lies so the people around them never grow close enough to challenge their control. The key to the trick is isolation. When people don't trust each other, they start depending on the manipulator, the only person who seems reliable. And the worst part? It doesn't even take outright lies. Just a missing detail, a twisted truth, or a well-timed comment is enough. Soon, friends become enemies, and the manipulator stays untouchable. Number 12, memory manipulation. What if some of your memories, the moments you're sure happened exactly the way you remember, never actually happened at all? What if someone could plant a memory in your mind, and you'd believe it as strongly as your real memories? It sounds like science fiction, but it's real. Memory is one of the most fragile and easily changed parts of the human mind, and that makes it a perfect tool for manipulation. Take the Lost in the Mall experiment by psychologist Elizabeth Loftus. Participants were told stories from their childhood. Some were true, but one story was completely fake. It said they got lost in a shopping mall when they were young. At first, no one remembered it, but after being asked about it again and again, and being gently led by suggestions, many of them started to remember details. They remembered who found them, what the mall looked like, how they felt. They swore it happened, even though it never did. Their minds had filled in the blanks and built a completely false memory. This wasn't just someone remembering wrong. This was memory being rewritten. Our brains don't store memories like a camera. We don't take perfect snapshots. Instead, every time we remember something, we rebuild it, pulling together little pieces and filling in the gaps. And each time we do that, we change it a little. Here's the scary part. The more you remember something, the less accurate it becomes. This means, with the right kind of influence, someone can change your past. They can make you remember things differently, change how you feel about them, even convince you something happened when it didn't. One easy way to manipulate memory is through suggestion, saying things like, "Are you sure that's what happened?" Or, "I remember it differently," creates doubt. To fix the confusion, your brain starts adjusting your memory to match the new story. Over time, that fake version becomes your truth. Next comes reinforcement. If other people agree with the false memory, whether they're lying or just wrong, your brain is more likely to accept it. We trust what a group agrees on more than our own doubt. So if everyone else remembers it that way, we think we must be wrong. This isn't just a weird brain trick. It's been used in dangerous ways. Police have made people confess to crimes they didn't commit by reshaping their memories during long questioning. Abusive partners rewrite history, convincing their victims they caused problems that weren't their fault. Governments and propaganda groups twist the facts of history to shape how people see the world. Memory is the foundation of who we are, how we see ourselves, what we believe, how we understand the world. But if someone else can rewrite your past, then they can shape your future too. And the worst part? By the time you realize your mind has been altered, if you ever do, it's already too late. Number 13, triangulation jealousy induction. There's a trick so subtle it can make even the most confident person feel insecure, anxious, and desperate without realizing why. It's called triangulation, often used with jealousy induction, and it's one of the most effective manipulation tactics in toxic relationships, workplaces, and even politics. At its core, triangulation is when someone brings a third person, real or imaginary, into a relationship to create competition, jealousy, or insecurity. For example, a controlling partner might casually mention how attractive or successful someone else is. They might compare their current partner to an ex, suggesting they don't measure up. Sometimes they even invent other people who are supposedly interested in them just to make the victim feel insecure. At first, it just seems like a comment or a story, but over time, it changes everything. The victim starts working harder to earn approval, to feel good enough. They stop asking if the relationship is healthy and start asking, "What's wrong with me?" Jealousy induction takes this further. Now, the manipulator doesn't just talk about other people, they act. They flirt in front of their partner. They praise others, especially when the partner is watching. They make sure the victim sees the attention they get. This creates deep insecurity. The more unsure and unstable the victim feels, the easier they are to control. This doesn't just happen in love. In workplaces, toxic bosses play employees against each other, favoring one person today, another tomorrow, keeping everyone nervous. In families, a parent might compare children to create rivalry. In politics, leaders divide people into groups to keep control. Why does it work? Because humans need to feel chosen and valued. When someone we care about or respect introduces competition, we panic. We fight to get their approval again, even if they're the ones hurting us. The real danger of triangulation is how it rewires your mind. It changes your focus from, "Is this relationship healthy for me?" to "How do I become good enough for them?" It breeds paranoia, low self-esteem, and emotional dependence, while making the manipulator seem powerful and wanted. How do you stop it? Recognize the pattern. If someone makes you feel like you're constantly in competition, ask yourself, who benefits from this? Refuse to play the game. If you stop reacting, the manipulator loses power. Prioritize self-worth. The more secure you are in yourself, the harder it is to be manipulated by jealousy or comparison. Triangulation is a game of control, but once you see it, you don't have to play. Number 14, playing on insecurities. Everyone has insecurities. Those small whispers of doubt that creep in like, am I good enough? Do they really like me? What if I fail? Now imagine someone knowing exactly what your insecurities are. and using them to control you. This is one of the darkest manipulation tricks, weaponizing insecurity to change how someone behaves. And it happens everywhere. Relationships, jobs, politics, even advertising. One of the most famous examples? Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme. He didn't just steal billions. He exploited people's fears. He targeted wealthy investors afraid of missing out. He made them feel special, chosen, exclusive. And once they were hooked, he used their greed and self-doubt against them. Even when warning signs appeared, they kept giving him money. That's how this trick works. It starts by identifying someone's deepest fear or desire and twisting it. A partner subtly makes you feel unattractive, so you keep trying to win their approval. A boss hints you're replaceable, so you work harder for less. A friend reminds you of past failures, so you don't outshine them. The goal is to make you dependent on the manipulator's approval, praise, or reassurance. And it's highly effective because insecurity clouds your thinking. When you feel not good enough, you start questioning yourself. You push harder to feel accepted, even if it's hurting you. The manipulator controls the validation supply. They can give it, take it away, and make you work harder to earn it back. Social media is full of this. Algorithms show you ads that make you feel unattractive, unsuccessful, or behind in life. Influencers make their lives look perfect, so yours feels small. Brands sell solutions to problems you didn't even know you had until they told you. But it's not just ads. It happens in families and relationships too. A toxic parent constantly tells their child they'd be nothing without them. A jealous friend downplays your wins so you never feel truly successful. A partner chips away at your confidence until you feel lucky to have them. Over time, these tactics wear you down, making you easier to control. How do you stop it? Recognize the pattern. If someone's words or actions make you feel small or unsure, ask, are they helping you grow or making you depend on them? Rebuild confidence outside their control. The more your self-worth comes from within, the harder it is to manipulate you. Remember this, anyone who truly cares about you will never use your insecurities against you. The worst part of this trick? Most people don't even know it's happening until it's far too late. Number 15, Stockholm Syndrome. There's a moment in every hostage situation where the victim should fear their captor, hate them, fight them, and do whatever it takes to escape. But sometimes something strange happens instead. The victim starts defending them, trusting them, even loving them. The term Stockholm Syndrome comes from a 1973 bank robbery in Stockholm, Sweden. 4 hostages were locked in a vault for 6 days. When police finally rescued them, the hostages defended their captors. One even raised money for the captor's legal defense. This shocked people around the world. How could victims side with the people who threatened their lives? But this wasn't just a one-time event. It happens in kidnappings, cults, abusive relationships, and even prisoner of war camps. Stockholm Syndrome isn't about being weak. It's about surviving. When someone is trapped and powerless, their brain stops trying to fight and starts trying to cope. The captor controls everything, food, movement, even life and death. The brain rewires fear into attachment. It often starts with small acts of kindness. A kidnapper gives food. An abuser apologizes. A cult leader offers protection from a supposed outside threat. These moments confuse the victim. The person causing fear also becomes the one giving comfort. The mind clings to that comfort. Then comes isolation. The victim is cut off from the outside world and must rely only on the captor. Over time, their own identity fades. They stop questioning and start justifying what's happening. That's why many abuse victims defend their abusers, and why hostages sometimes don't even try to escape when they have the chance. Eventually, dependency is complete. The only way to stay safe is to keep the captor happy. The victim stops resisting and might even feel gratitude, loyalty, or love. This is why Stockholm Syndrome is so scary. It shows how easily our minds can be tricked into believing that our captor is our protector. The victim ends up defending their own suffering, and often doesn't realize it until it's too late. Number 16, engineered dependence. A.K.A. cultivated dependence. Abusers, cult leaders, and dictators rarely need to use physical chains, because the most powerful form of control is mental. Instead of locking someone up, they make that person believe they can't survive without them. This is called engineered dependence. It's a psychological trick designed to make someone willingly hand over control of their life. It works because it targets a deep human need, the need for connection. It begins by slowly removing choices and freedom, one step at a time, through subtle manipulation. A partner says your friends don't really care about you. A group says your family is toxic. A leader warns that only they know the truth and the outside world is dangerous. At first, these sound like suggestions, but over time, they become rules, then beliefs. Eventually, the victim looks around and realizes they're completely alone. Once they're isolated, dependency sets in. The abuser becomes the victim's only source of comfort, approval, safety, even for basic needs like food and shelter. They start creating problems that only they can solve. They give rewards only when the victim obeys. In extreme cases, they take over money, choices, and even movement. The victim loses the ability to make decisions for themselves, not because they don't want to, but because they've been taught to believe they can't. Here's the cruel part. The victim thinks they're choosing this. They're not locked up. But they stay because the world has been twisted so completely that freedom feels like danger. This method has been used throughout history. Cults cut members off from family and make the leader the only source of truth. Abusive partners destroy their victims' confidence until they feel worthless alone. Totalitarian governments censor the news so citizens believe they need the system to survive. Once someone is broken down like this, they no longer need to be trapped. They choose to stay. Even when the doors are wide open, they hesitate. Because if your entire identity is shaped by someone else's control, freedom doesn't feel like safety. It feels like a threat. Number 17, learned helplessness. In 1973, Patty Hearst, a rich young woman, was kidnapped by a militant group. At first, she resisted. They beat her, locked her in a dark closet, and kept her alone for weeks. But after a few months, something shocking happened. She was seen holding a gun, robbing a bank, with the same people who had hurt her. This wasn't just fear, it was learned helplessness. This happens when someone is broken down by constant fear, failure, or isolation. The brain starts to believe escape is no longer possible, even if it actually is. The victim gives up hope, not because they want to, but because they've been trained to believe they can't win. Psychologists discovered this idea with an experiment. Dogs were placed in cages with electric floors. At first, they tried to escape, but after being shocked again and again with no way out, they stopped trying. Even when the door was later opened, they stayed. They had learned helplessness. This happens to people too. It often starts with unpredictable behavior. One day, the abuser is kind, the next, they're cruel. The victim never knows what to expect, so their brain goes into survival mode. Then comes self-doubt. The manipulator tells the victim they're weak, stupid, or broken. Eventually, the victim believes it. They stop trusting their own thoughts. Then comes isolation. Friends and family disappear. Without other voices to remind them of who they were, their world becomes very small. Their captor's voice becomes the only one they hear. Finally, forced dependence. The victim relies on the abuser for food, safety, and even love. At this point, they don't just accept the abuse, they defend it, just like Patty Hearst did. This is why people stay in abusive relationships, why some prisoners bond with their captors, why cults keep control. It's not because the victims are weak, it's because their brain is focused on survival, not freedom. When someone is taught that escape is impossible, they stop trying. And that's the most terrifying part of learned helplessness. The most powerful thing a manipulator steals isn't freedom. It's your belief that freedom was ever possible. Number 18, suggestive language and hypnosis. Have you ever had a conversation where someone seemed to guide you toward a decision, one you thought was completely your own? Maybe you walked into a store and before you knew it, you were convinced to buy something you hadn't even considered. It felt like your choice, but what if it wasn't? What if just a few carefully chosen words could bypass your critical thinking and quietly plant a decision in your mind, without you even noticing? That's the quiet power of suggestive language and hypnosis. It's not about swinging pocket watches or making people cluck like chickens. It's about influencing your perception without triggering your defenses. It's subtle, almost invisible, and that's what makes it so dangerous. Take the infamous Lost in the Mall experiment in the 1970s. Psychologist Elizabeth Loftus told participants a completely made-up childhood story, that they got lost in a shopping mall, cried, and were eventually rescued by a kind stranger. The twist, it never actually happened, yet many participants remembered it in vivid emotional detail. Their minds filled in the gaps. They created memories that never existed just because someone suggested them. That's the terrifying thing about suggestive language. It doesn't have to be true. It only has to sound like something your brain will accept. Now combine that with hypnosis, and you have something even more unsettling. Hypnosis isn't mind control. It's a state of hyperfocus and deep relaxation. In that state, your mental defenses are lowered. Suggestions slide in without resistance. A skilled manipulator can use subtle, embedded commands, phrases hidden inside normal conversation, to influence your behavior, beliefs, and even your memories. For example, a politician might say, "When you step into that voting booth, you'll feel a strong sense of trust in our leadership." That phrase, "feel a strong sense of trust," actually isn't an argument, it's a subtle implant. It bypasses logic and appeals to emotion. Salespeople do it too. Would you like the steak or the seafood special? Notice what's missing? The option to say no. The question assumes you're ordering, just not which one. And then there's the yes ladder. Start small. "This is a nice car, isn't it? You'd love to drive something this reliable, right? Wouldn't it feel great to cruise down the highway in this?" Each yes builds momentum. By the time the big decision arrives, like signing a contract, your brain is already in agreement mode. Saying yes feels natural, but here's where it turns dark. Suggestive language doesn't just sway decisions, it can reshape identities. Cult leaders, interrogators, con artists, they all use it to manipulate narratives. Frame a question the right way, and you can change someone's sense of reality. Police interrogations, for example, have led to false confessions using nothing more than persistent suggestive language. A suspect might be told, "You don't remember it now, but memory comes back in pieces." Say that enough times and someone begins to doubt their own memory. Their brain tries to fill in the blanks until eventually they just believe they did it. That's the true horror. Once a suggestion sinks in, it's almost impossible to remove. A single sentence, a slight tone shift, a gentle phrase, and someone's entire perception of truth can be altered forever. So the next time you think, "This belief is mine," stop and ask, was it really yours to begin with? Number 19, priming effects. You walk into a store and hear soft classical music playing. Without realizing it, you feel more elegant, maybe even more willing to spend money. Later, you're at a restaurant. The menu is printed in elegant, flowing cursive. Suddenly, the higher-priced dishes seem more appealing. It all feels natural, like you're simply making choices. But what if you've already been primed? Priming is one of the most subtle yet powerful psychological tricks. It's the process of implanting an idea in your mind without you realizing it, gently nudging your behavior, feelings, or thoughts in a certain direction. There's no force, no persuasion, just a whisper to your subconscious, guiding you before you even know you're being guided. Take the old age experiment. Participants were asked to unscramble sentences containing words like wrinkled, Florida, and bingo. Afterward, researchers timed how long it took them to walk down the hallway. Those exposed to age-related words walked significantly slower. They weren't told to act older. Their brains just internalized the theme, and their bodies responded without question. That's how powerful priming can be. You see it everywhere. Grocery stores place fresh flowers near the entrance to make you associate the store with freshness. Political ads repeat the same slogans until they become familiar, and familiarity breeds trust. Employers reading words like failure before an interview may unconsciously judge candidates more harshly. Your brain is wired to look for patterns. So even tiny, unrelated cues can shape how you think and behave. If you hear the word yellow, you'll recognize the word banana faster than something unrelated. If you see a brand logo enough times, you might feel like you trust the company, even if you've never used their product. And it gets darker. Priming can shape entire narratives. News headlines choose words that set the emotional tone before you've read the details. A crime involving teenagers becomes gang violence or youth unrest, depending on the narrative someone wants you to adopt. Companies call layoffs right-sizing to make mass job cuts sound like smart strategy. In legal cases, priming can sway an entire jury. Ask witnesses, how fast was the car going when it smashed into the other? Versus, how fast was it going when it bumped into the other? That one word, smashed, makes people remember shattered glass and higher speeds, even when it never happened. Social media is a breeding ground for priming. Every like, every trending topic, every suggested post, it's constantly shaping your view of the world before you even have a chance to question it. Even colors matter. People primed with the color red tend to perform worse on tests. Why? Because red is unconsciously associated with danger and correction. But here's the scariest part. Once you've been primed, you don't question it. You start to filter the world through it. If you're primed to distrust someone, everything they do feels suspicious. If you expect a bad experience, you'll find reasons to confirm it, even if it's not actually bad. Priming doesn't just influence your mood, it rewrites your reality. So take a moment. Ask yourself not just what you believe, but why. How many of your thoughts are really yours? And how many were quietly planted there before you even realized? Number 20, door in the face technique. Imagine this. A charity worker stops you on the street and asks, "Would you be willing to donate $500 to help struggling families?" It's a big ask. You feel awkward, maybe a little guilty, and politely say no. Then they follow up with, "Totally understandable. How about just $20? That second request suddenly feels much smaller, much more reasonable. So without thinking, you reach into your pocket and hand over the money. You've just fallen for one of psychology's most powerful compliance techniques, the door in the face. Here's how it works. When someone makes a huge request first and then backs down to a smaller one, we feel a subconscious pressure to meet them halfway. It's called reciprocal concession. We feel like we owe them something simply because they compromised. It's been proven in studies. In one classic experiment, students were first asked to volunteer 2 hours a week for 2 years at a juvenile detention center. Everyone declined. But then came the second ask. Would you at least be willing to chaperone a one-day zoo trip? 3 times as many said yes to that second request compared to when it was offered alone. Why? Because the smaller request felt like a relief, a favor in contrast to the overwhelming first one. And this trick isn't just used by charities. Salespeople start with inflated prices only to cut you a deal down to the price they wanted all along. Law enforcement sometimes uses it too. A suspect is threatened with a severe punishment, only to be offered a lighter sentence if they confess. The second option feels like mercy, but it's often a strategic trap. Cults, abusive partners, and high-control groups use this technique to break resistance. They'll demand complete obedience or impossible sacrifice, then relent and ask for just a little loyalty, a small compromise. And suddenly that smaller demand feels like a fair deal, but it's not. It's bait. Because the real trick of the door in the face isn't getting you to agree, it's making you believe that agreeing was your own idea. Number 21, foot in the door technique. Let's flip the script. This time someone asks you a small favor. Would you be willing to put a tiny sticker in your window to support a cause you care about? Seems harmless. You say yes. But a few weeks later, that same organization comes back with a bigger request. Would you now put up a full-size sign in your front yard? Statistically, you're much more likely to say yes. Why? Because you already said yes once. That's the foot in the door technique, another powerful manipulation tool that doesn't feel like manipulation at all. It feels like your choice, and that's what makes it so dangerous. One of the most chilling real-world examples, the Patty Hearst case. In 1974, she was kidnapped by a radical group. At first, she was terrified, but they didn't force her to pledge allegiance right away. They started small. First, they made her record a message denouncing her family. Then came minor tasks. Before long, she was robbing banks with them, believing in their cause. That's how it works. The consistency bias takes over. Once you say yes to something small, your brain wants to stay consistent with that choice. When the bigger request comes, you think, I already said yes once. This must be the right thing to do. Advertisers use this constantly. That free trial, it's not about letting you test a service. It's the first yes. And when the trial ends, canceling feels like backtracking. You've mentally committed. High-pressure sales reps do it too. Just take a test drive. Then, just sit down and talk numbers. Next thing you know, you're signing a contract, trapped by your own momentum. And in cults and extremist groups, this is standard practice. They don't ask for total loyalty up front. First, it's come to a meeting. Then, just sign this. Then, just donate a little. Every step deeper makes the next step harder to resist. So the next time someone asks you for a small favor, remember, the real trap might not be in that first ask. It's in what comes after. Number 22, creating a sense of urgency. Picture this. You're scrolling through an online store and you spot the perfect item. But right underneath, a red warning flashes, only 2 left in stock, sale ends in 3 minutes. Your heart races, you don't have time to think. If you hesitate, it could be gone forever. So you buy it. That's urgency manipulation in action, one of the most effective psychological tactics ever used. It bypasses logic, it skips over critical thinking, it forces impulse decisions, and worst of all, most people never realize it's happening. Consider the 1938 War of the Worlds broadcast. Orson Welles performed a fictional alien invasion as if it were real news. People panicked. They didn't stop to question whether it was true. It felt immediate. That's what urgency does. It hijacks your mind and triggers survival mode. It plays on something called loss aversion, the idea that people fear losing something more than they value gaining it. The thought of missing out becomes more powerful than the actual desire for the item. Marketers know this. Flash sale. Limited time offer. Only 3 left. Those aren't facts. They're pressure tactics. And the moment you feel rushed, you're no longer making a free decision. It gets even darker. Scammers, cult leaders, and con artists thrive on urgency. Pyramid schemes pressure you to act now or you'll miss your big chance. Victims are pushed into fast decisions, without research, without time to think. Even politicians and media exploit this. Breaking news alerts, emergency press conferences, fear-based headlines, they all create urgency. Why? Because when you're scared, you don't fact-check, you react. It's how riots start, how stock markets crash, how entire populations are moved in a single night. The moment emotions take over, reason disappears. And that's when people become the easiest to control. What makes urgency so dangerous is how natural it feels. It tricks you into believing you're making a fast, smart decision, but often someone else made that decision for you. So the next time you see a ticking clock or a red warning sign telling you to act now, pause, breathe, because if you're feeling rushed, you may already be under someone else's control. Number 23, exploiting the need for closure. Some questions never stop echoing in your mind. Why did they leave? What really happened? What was the truth? That gnawing uncertainty, that sense of unfinished business, isn't just a mild irritation. It's a deep psychological force called the need for closure. And when someone understands how badly you want an answer, they can use it to control you in ways you'd never expect. The need for closure is built into how we think. Our brains hate loose ends. When something's unresolved, we become obsessed with tying it up. We create explanations, we imagine possibilities, we fill in the blanks, just to feel a sense of resolution. That's exactly where manipulation begins. Think about relationships. Ever known someone who couldn't let go of an ex, not because they wanted them back, but because they never got a real answer about why it ended? That's the power of an open psychological loop. When a breakup happens without closure, the mind spins endlessly, replaying memories, searching for missed clues. And if that same person who left you confused suddenly returns, even with a half-hearted excuse, your brain latches onto it. Any answer feels better than none. Manipulators know this. That's why they vanish without explanation, only to reappear later, offering vague or dishonest stories. They know their victims are too relieved to question the truth, but this trick isn't limited to personal relationships. Cults use it masterfully. Leaders often hint at life-changing secrets, truths that are just out of reach. Followers are told they're almost ready to know everything, but they need to prove themselves first. Prove it how? Through endless loyalty, more obedience, more sacrifice, and the truth? There is no secret. The goal is to keep people trapped in an endless cycle of searching, because the longer you search, the deeper you're pulled in. Politicians exploit this too. Instead of offering facts, they hint. They're not telling you everything. The real story is hidden. They don't fill in the blanks. They leave you to do that yourself. And here's the dark part. When you fill in the blanks, you believe your version more than the truth. People become attached to their own invented answers, even when those answers are false. Marketers use this every day. Ever notice how commercials tease a product but never show it? Or how TV shows end on cliffhangers? It's deliberate. Your mind needs resolution, so it stays hooked, searching, anticipating, craving an end that's being strategically withheld. And when that closure finally arrives, through a purchase, a click, or an explanation, you jump at it. Even if it's fake, the scariest part, when people are desperate for closure, they'll believe almost anything. Conspiracy theories, misinformation, bold-faced lies, because it's easier to believe a convenient lie than to live with ongoing uncertainty. The more we crave answers, the easier we are to control. And in the end, whoever controls the answers controls the mind. Number 24, creating a sense of scarcity. Ever notice how something becomes instantly more desirable the moment it seems limited or exclusive? That's the scarcity effect, and it's one of the most aggressively exploited psychological tricks in the world. It doesn't matter if it's a luxury car, a rare sneaker, or even someone's attention. When something feels hard to get, we start wanting it more. Take Black Friday. Every year, people trample over one another for discounted electronics, not because they need another TV, but because they're told supplies are running out. Stores create this illusion on purpose. They manufacture scarcity. Even if the same item will be restocked next week, in that moment, panic takes over. The fear of missing out hijacks your brain. Why does it work? Because thousands of years ago, scarcity meant survival. Limited food, water, or shelter triggered a primal response. Fight for what's available or risk death. That instinct still lives in us today. It's why luxury brands limit production. The fewer handbags there are, the more people crave them. Not because they're better, but because they're rare. It's why influencers lock content behind paywalls. The illusion of exclusivity makes you want it more. It's why someone who ignores you suddenly becomes the one you obsess over. The less accessible they are, the more you chase them. But this goes far beyond products or relationships. Totalitarian regimes restrict access to information, making it feel more valuable. Cults claim only they possess the truth, and that the rest of the world is empty and false. The less you're allowed to have, the more you believe it matters. Scarcity even overrides logic. When something seems to be slipping away, we stop asking if we even want it. We just react, and that's when manipulation wins. Number 25, bandwagon effect manipulation. It starts with a simple thought. Everyone else is doing it, so it must be right. This is the bandwagon effect, a psychological trick that preys on your deepest fear, the fear of being left out. It's what drives people to follow trends, join mobs, and believe ideas they've never truly questioned. Look at the Salem witch trials. A few people cried witch, and suddenly a wave of accusations and executions swept through the town. Why? Because people saw their neighbors joining in, and when the crowd moves, standing against it feels impossible. That's the core of the bandwagon effect. Once enough people believe something, others follow. Not because they've reasoned it through, but because they don't want to be left behind. It's why financial bubbles form. Remember the 2008 housing crisis? People kept investing in real estate because prices kept rising, and everyone else was doing it. Until the bubble popped and it was too late. It's why propaganda works. A government doesn't need to convince everyone, just enough to create the illusion of consensus. Once people see a crowd forming, they stop questioning and start conforming. Advertisers use it. Social media algorithms exploit it. Viral content is boosted not because it's true or valuable, but because people are already liking and sharing it. That engagement becomes social proof, fueling a cycle of blind agreement. Politicians stage fake crowds to suggest widespread support. Influencers fake followers to seem more trustworthy. It's all built on the bandwagon effect. Make it look like everyone's in, and people will follow without asking why. The more people fall in line, the stronger the effect becomes, until eventually it doesn't even feel like manipulation. It just feels like your choice. Number 26, lowballing. Picture this. You walk into a car dealership, hopeful and excited. The salesperson smiles and says, "Good news, this fully loaded car is just $20,000 today." It's in your budget, you shake hands, you imagine yourself behind the wheel, you're all in. But just before you sign the paperwork, they glance at the fine print and say, "Oops, I forgot. That price doesn't include a few mandatory fees. It's actually $23,000. Now you're already mentally committed. You've imagined owning the car. Maybe you've even told your friends. So instead of walking away, you say yes to the higher price. That's lowballing, a manipulation tactic where someone gets you to agree to something before revealing the full cost. It works because once you've committed, your brain wants to stay consistent. Backing out feels like a loss, even when the deal has changed. There's science to back it up. In one study, college students were asked to participate in an experiment. Most said yes. But after they agreed, they were told it started at 7 a.m. Most still went through with it. Why? Because their minds had already said yes. Lowballing shows up everywhere. Job offers that start with big promises but later include hidden demands. Relationships that begin with kindness but escalate into endless obligations. Cult recruitment that starts with a harmless meeting but slowly adds more intense commitments. The most dangerous thing about lowballing isn't just losing money, it's losing control. Because once you've committed to step 1, you're more likely to take steps 2, 3, and 4, even if they're no longer what you signed up for. Number 27, emotional contagion exploitation. Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt the energy shift? Maybe someone's irritated glance made you tense, or a friend's excitement lifted your mood in seconds. That's not just intuition. It's a real psychological phenomenon called emotional contagion, and in the wrong hands, it's one of the most dangerous forms of manipulation. Emotional contagion is the subconscious transfer of emotions from one person to another. Humans are wired to mirror the emotional states of those around us. It's how we connect, build empathy, and communicate. If someone near you is anxious, your brain picks up their subtle signals, body language, tone, facial expressions. Before you realize it, you're anxious too. It happens without you even being aware of it. And that's exactly why it's so easy to exploit. A terrifying example? Mass hysteria, like in the Salem witch trials. One person shows fear, another reacts, and soon an entire town is swallowed in paranoia. No one pauses to question the source. Everyone just rides the emotional wave. The same thing plays out in stock market crashes, riots, cults, even in viral social movements. When people around you panic, you panic. Even if there's no rational reason, it's instinct. Manipulators use emotional contagion to control without saying, "Do this." They simply create a feeling, a charged emotional atmosphere, and people naturally align with it. A leader who radiates confidence makes their followers ignore warning signs. A narcissist who cries convincingly makes their partner feel guilty for wanting to leave. A salesperson who's giddy with excitement can make you feel like you absolutely need that product, just because they're so enthusiastic. Even fake emotions can trigger real reactions. Studies prove it. If a manipulator pretends to be angry, frightened, or inspired, people around them start feeling those emotions too. And once you're emotionally hooked, your ability to think clearly, critically, begins to fade. That's why political figures rile up crowds into frenzies, why cult leaders maintain unwavering control, why toxic partners seem impossible to leave, because whoever controls the emotional climate controls everyone within it. So the next time your emotions shift suddenly, ask yourself, is this actually mine, or was it planted there? Number 28, micro-manipulation. Imagine this. You're talking to someone and the conversation feels totally normal. But after a few minutes, something's shifted. You start second-guessing yourself. You feel oddly guilty about things you've never questioned before. And yet, the other person never raised their voice, never told you what to do. Still, your mind somehow ends up in a completely different place. That's micromanipulation, one of the most subtle but terrifying tactics in manipulation. It's not about yelling or threatening, it's about tiny, almost invisible nudges. Gradual suggestions, a slow drip of influence. Unlike obvious coercion, micromanipulation works like poison in small doses, drip by drip, adjusting how you think, how you feel, how you behave. Take the classic foot in the door tactic. A salesperson asks you to sign a simple petition, something harmless you agree with. Then later they ask you to donate money to the cause. Because you already agreed once, your brain leans toward consistency. That small first yes makes it harder to say no the second time. In toxic relationships, this technique is deadly. The manipulator never gives direct orders. Instead, they sigh, they pause, they raise an eyebrow at just the right moment. And slowly, without a word, you start adjusting your behavior just to avoid their disapproval. Workplaces do it too. Ever had a boss mention how someone stayed late to finish a project? They didn't tell you to work late, but suddenly you feel like you should. Micromanipulation is about planting ideas without ever stating them. A kind of social and emotional programming. In advertising and media, it's used to shape public behavior. Artificial urgency like only 5 left or limited time offer doesn't order you to buy, but it nudges you to act. You believe you're choosing freely, but you're actually being steered. Even more chilling. Gaslighting is often built on micromanipulation. A manipulator doesn't need to say you're crazy. They just question your memory. They reframe the situation. They say, "Are you sure that happened?" And with enough repetition, you start doubting yourself, while they maintain complete control. The scariest thing about micromanipulation? You think you're in control, but every thought feels like your own. Every decision feels self-made. The truth is, It's all been carefully shaped by someone else. Number 29, the illusion of choice. You think you're in charge. You think you're making your own decisions. But what if I told you most of those choices were already designed for you? This is the psychological trick called the illusion of choice, and it's one of the most deceptive tools in manipulation. Take something simple, a restaurant menu. You see steak, pasta, or salad. You make your pick. But did you ever ask why those three options were on the menu to begin with? Why wasn't sushi or soup even on the list? The answer, someone else already limited your choices. This happens all the time, in politics, media, marketing, even in your relationships. Supermarkets are a perfect example. You walk in for a loaf of bread, but you leave with a basket full of things you never planned to buy. Why? Because the store layout guided you there. You thought you were choosing, but you were actually following a path designed to influence your behavior. Think about political debates. You're told there are two sides. Pick one, left or right, red or blue. But what if the real manipulation was the structure of the argument itself? What if the person in power created both sides, knowing that either way, you'd be choosing within a trap? Marketers use the illusion of choice constantly. Ever see three pricing options? One cheap, one expensive, and one just right in the middle? That middle tier was placed there to subtly push you toward it. Your choice wasn't as free as you thought. In personal relationships, the trick can be even more toxic. Someone says, "Do it my way, or we're done." That's not a real choice. That's emotional coercion disguised as freedom. The most dangerous part of this trick is how convincing it is. You feel like you're in control. But the person who built the options already decided the outcome. True freedom isn't about picking from a pre-selected menu. It's about asking, who created the menu in the first place? The best manipulators don't take away your choices. They just make you believe you had them all along. Number 30, sowing self-doubt. You don't need chains to keep someone trapped. Sometimes all it takes is a quiet voice in their mind, one that makes them question everything they once believed about themselves. The most dangerous form of control doesn't use force. It comes from planting a single thought. What if I'm not good enough? This is the trick of sowing self-doubt, a psychological tactic that tears down confidence, reshapes reality, and keeps someone stuck in a loop of second-guessing every decision they make. And the scariest part? Once that doubt is planted, most people end up watering it themselves. A good example is often hidden inside the famous Milgram experiment. While it's mostly remembered for obedience to authority, something more subtle happened too. The participants weren't just following orders. They were gradually led to question their own moral instincts. At first, they hesitated. But after being told, "It's fine," or "You have to do this," many started doubting themselves. With each step forward, their resistance faded. By the end, they had convinced themselves that maybe their initial hesitation was wrong, that maybe they were just overreacting. That's how self-doubt works. It doesn't arrive like lightning, it creeps in slowly, often through calculated, strategic words. It can begin with something small, like, "Are you sure that's the right decision?" That doesn't really sound like you. You always mess things up like this. If said enough, these words force the brain to search for proof. People begin to wonder if those doubts are actually true. And when they start to believe it, their self-confidence collapses like a house of cards. Manipulators know this. That's why they use self-doubt as a silent weapon. If you make someone doubt themselves enough, they'll come to you for reassurance. They'll seek your validation. They'll want you to tell them they're doing the right thing. Slowly, they lose trust in their own judgment and rely on you instead. That's how toxic relationships survive. That's how abusers keep victims trapped. That's how cult leaders keep control. Not by force, but by making their followers question their own minds. And the worst part? Even if the manipulator disappears, the self-doubt stays. The seeds they planted continue to grow. The voice inside says, "Maybe they were right about me." That's what makes this trick so dangerous. It doesn't just break people, it teaches them how to break themselves. Number 31, exploiting mirror neurons. Have you ever yawned after seeing someone else yawn, or smiled when a room burst into laughter? That's not just coincidence, it's your brain mirroring. But what helps us connect as humans can also be turned into a weapon. At the heart of this trick are mirror neurons, special brain cells that fire not only when we act, but when we see someone else act. These neurons are why we flinch when someone gets hurt, or feel warm when someone smiles at us. They are the foundation of empathy, bonding, and influence. But like any powerful tool, mirror neurons can be used to manipulate. Take one of history's darkest examples, Adolf Hitler. He didn't just deliver speeches, he mirrored the emotions of the crowd. He reflected their fears, anger, and hopes back at them. His speeches became emotional feedback loops. He wasn't just talking to it, he was amplifying what the audience already felt. He didn't win them over with logic, he made them feel something. And once emotions take over, critical thinking shuts down. But you don't need a massive rally to use this trick. It happens in everyday life. Salespeople, cult leaders, politicians, and con artists do it constantly. A manipulator might subtly copy your posture, tone, or gestures. They make you feel comfortable, safe, familiar. Your brain picks up on the similarities and thinks, this person is like me, I can trust them. That's why skilled con artists can get people to spill their secrets within minutes. They're not just listening, they're mirroring you back to yourself. This trick can even create attraction. Studies show that when someone subtly copies your body language, you're more likely to like them, trust them, and agree with them, even if you've just met. That's how some toxic relationships begin. The abuser mirrors the victim at first, shares the same interests, values, even personality. It feels like perfect compatibility, but once that emotional bond is formed, the mirroring stops and the control begins. By then, it's often too late for the victim to walk away. And this isn't just about people. It's built into systems. Social media platforms use digital mirroring. Algorithms show you content that matches your views, emotions, and preferences. The more you engage, the more they reflect back, reinforcing your beliefs, filtering out anything that challenges them. Over time, this builds echo chambers, polarization, and tunnel vision. So how do you protect yourself? First, notice when you're being mirrored. If someone is copying your mannerisms too closely, pause and think. Second, break the pattern, change your posture, shift the topic, introduce something unexpected. A genuine person will go with the flow. A manipulator will struggle because they need predictability to stay in control. Mirror neurons are a part of what makes us human. They let us connect, learn, and care, but in the wrong hands, they can be turned against us, turning your own instincts into tools of manipulation. And the most frightening part, when this trick is done well, you won't even realize it's happening. Number 32, exploiting empathy. Empathy is often seen as a strength, the foundation of love, compassion, and connection. But when used by the wrong person, empathy becomes a weapon. The most dangerous manipulators don't use force. They make you feel like helping them is your own choice. Take Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a disturbing example of weaponized empathy. A caregiver, often a parent, makes their child sick or pretends they are, just to get sympathy. The child suffers, becomes dependent, and never questions the caregiver. They think they're being helped, when in reality, they're being controlled and hurt. The abuser enjoys the attention and control that comes from being seen as a loving caretaker. Meanwhile, the victim's compassion keeps them trapped. This trick works by making someone feel responsible, then offering yourself as the solution. It often starts with emotional guilt, like, you're the only one who understands me. If you leave, I don't know what I'll do. The goal is to make the victim feel irreplaceable, while slowly breaking down their independence. If they resist, the manipulator just increases the emotional pressure. They ask for more. They cry louder, they push harder. Eventually, the person breaks under the weight of emotional exhaustion. This is called compassion fatigue. And once it sets in, giving in feels easier than resisting. This technique shows up everywhere. Cults ask followers to give up everything for a greater cause. They say leaving is selfish. Toxic partners make their lovers feel guilty for even thinking about leaving. Scammers pretend to be helpless victims, sending heartbreaking messages designed to trigger your compassion. And the scariest part, the more empathetic you are, the easier it is to manipulate you. Because once your compassion becomes an obligation, you don't see the trap, you defend it. Number 33, obligation and reciprocity manipulation. A small favor feels harmless, thoughtful even. Someone buys you coffee, helps you move, supports you during a hard time. You don't owe them, but you still feel like you should give something back. That's the psychology of obligation, the reciprocity principle. It's the idea that when someone gives, we're supposed to give in return. This instinct helps keep friendships fair and societies functioning, but when used as a tool of manipulation, it becomes something else, a trap. Back in the 1970s, members of the Hare Krishna movement stood in airports handing out flowers to strangers. Just a gift, no strings attached. But seconds later, they'd ask for donations. Most people, even those who didn't want the flower, gave money, not because they had to, but because they felt they should. This simple act of giving pulled in millions of dollars. Why? Because people didn't want to seem ungrateful. A kind gesture had become a psychological trick. This is how reciprocity works. It doesn't force you. It makes saying no feel wrong. It builds slowly. A compliment, a favor, a gift. until you feel like you owe something. In personal relationships, this turns into quiet control. A partner who showers you with love and gifts later says, "After everything I've done for you, you won't do this one thing for me?" A friend who's always generous starts guilt-tripping you when you can't match their energy. What once felt like kindness becomes something you can't say no to. Businesses and scammers use this too. Free samples, free trials, charities sending gifts before asking for donations. Even fake tech support calls offering help before making their ask. And once you feel that unspoken debt, it's hard to break free. People stay in bad relationships. They say yes when they should say no. They keep quiet when they should walk away. The way out? Recognize the trick. Not every favor needs repayment. Not every kind gesture is genuine. If saying no makes you feel guilty, ask yourself, was this truly a gift or a transaction in disguise? Number 34, scapegoating. History often repeats itself not because people don't learn, but because manipulation continues to work. One of the oldest and most dangerous tricks is scapegoating. The act of blaming one person or group for a problem they didn't cause. This tactic is incredibly powerful. It has led to witch hunts, brought down governments, and destroyed innocent lives. A famous example is the Salem witch trials in the late 1600s. The people in the Massachusetts Bay Colony were terrified. Strange illnesses, failed crops, and rising tensions made them desperate for answers. But instead of facing the real, complex reasons behind these events, they found a simple but horrifying explanation: witchcraft. Dozens of people, mostly women, were blamed without real evidence. Neighbors turned against neighbors. Executions followed. But the actual root problems, fear and uncertainty, were ignored. Because scapegoating isn't about truth. It's about shifting the blame to control how people see the situation. Why does this work so well? Because people want simple answers to complex problems. It's easier to point to a single villain than to accept that issues can be messy or unclear. Blame offers comfort, even when it's built on lies. And this trick still works today. A cheating spouse might call their partner paranoid. A corrupt politician might say the media is out to get them. A CEO might blame lazy workers when the company fails. The real problem is hidden and attention is misdirected. The longer scapegoating continues, the harder it is to find the truth. People become attached to their version of events. They reject any facts that challenge it. Entire groups have been punished throughout history, not because they did anything wrong, but because someone needed a villain. To avoid falling for this trick, always look deeper. If the blame is placed on just one person or one group, ask yourself who benefits from that narrative. What is being ignored? Are you being led to believe a convenient lie instead of a difficult truth? Because the strongest kind of control doesn't come from force, it comes from fear. And fear, when given a face, becomes a weapon. Number 35, authority bias. In 1961, psychologist Stanley Milgram ran an experiment to test how far people would go in following orders from someone in charge. He wanted to understand obedience to authority. Participants were told they were helping with a learning study. They had to give electric shocks to another person for every wrong answer. Each mistake meant a stronger shock, from mild pain to extreme agony. The person being shocked screamed, begged, and finally went silent. But it was all fake. The person was an actor. No shocks were real. Still, most participants kept pressing the button. They looked uncomfortable. But when the man in the white lab coat said, "Keep going," they obeyed. In fact, 2/3 of them delivered what they thought were deadly shocks, just because someone in authority told them to. This is called authority bias. The natural human tendency to trust and obey people who seem powerful, smart, or in control. It's why we follow doctors' orders without asking questions, why we believe news anchors, why we accept company policies even when they make no sense. But this instinct can be used against us. In the wrong hands, authority bias overrides logic, morality, and self-protection. Corrupt governments have used it to commit crimes. Companies have used it to silence whistleblowers. Cult leaders have used it to control people completely, even leading them to give up their freedom or lives. Authority bias works because our brains take shortcuts. We don't question everything. If someone wears a uniform, holds a title, or speaks with confidence, we assume they know what they're doing. And the more confident they act, the harder it is to challenge them. This is why scammers pretend to be police officers or doctors. It's why soldiers have followed horrific orders in war. When fear is added to authority, the control becomes nearly impossible to resist. If an authority figure not only commands but also threatens, most people obey, even if they know it's wrong. And here's the scariest part. You don't even need real power to use this trick. Just the illusion of authority, a uniform, a fake badge, or a confident voice is often enough to make people obey without question. The most effective manipulators don't use force. They make people willingly hand over control. Number 36, groupthink induction. Another powerful manipulation tactic isn't about controlling individuals, it's about shaping the minds of entire groups. This is called groupthink. Groupthink happens when people stop thinking for themselves because disagreeing with the group feels unsafe. It's not about forcing agreement. It's about creating an environment where staying silent feels easier than speaking up. Picture this, a high-stakes corporate meeting. The company is about to release a product, but the research shows it won't sell. The engineers know there are technical problems, some executives have doubts, but in the meeting room, no one says anything. Everyone agrees, not because they believe in the idea, but because no one wants to be the one who speaks up. This is groupthink. It's when the need to belong becomes stronger than the need to be right. People prioritize harmony over truth. Disagreeing feels like betrayal. Even when something obviously doesn't make sense, people stay silent because they don't want to be the outsider. It starts slowly. A leader shares a strong opinion, others fall in line, or maybe the group values unity so much that anyone who questions things feels like a threat. Over time, the pressure to conform becomes stronger than the pressure to think critically. People ignore their own doubts. They justify bad decisions. They tell themselves, if everyone agrees, it must be the right thing. But it isn't. And the damage can be massive. History is full of disasters caused by groupthink, failed wars, financial crises, political mistakes. The signs were there, the problems were clear, but no one spoke up when it counted. The worst part, inside the groupthink bubble, people don't feel controlled. They believe they're thinking freely, but really they're just repeating what the group says. Number 37, cultivating a false identity. Some manipulators go beyond lying, they become the lie. They build entire fake identities, carefully shaped to earn trust and admiration. This trick is known as cultivating a false identity. It's not just about telling a few lies, it's about acting out a role, like a performer. And when done well, it's almost impossible to detect. A famous example is Frank Abagnale, the real-life con artist from Catch Me If You Can. Before he turned 21, he had tricked people into thinking he was a pilot, a doctor, and even a lawyer. He had no real training, just confidence, charm, and believable details. His entire identity was an illusion, but it worked. Why? Because he understood something important. People don't question what looks real. We judge others based on first impressions. If someone acts like they belong, speaks clearly, and dresses the part, we fill in the gaps. We assume they're who they say they are. A good manipulator becomes the person we want them to be. And once that false identity is accepted, it starts to feed itself. Other people start defending it. They vouch for the manipulator. They ignore warning signs. If enough people believe the lie, it becomes a shared reality. Cult leaders convince followers they're divine. Scammers build reputations that no one dares question. Even entire nations have been fooled by leaders who were never who they claim to be, and something even more dangerous happens. The manipulator starts to believe the lie themselves. They lose track of what's real. The line between truth and fiction disappears, not just for the victims, but for the manipulator too. Number 38, subliminal messaging. You think you're in control of your thoughts, your choices, and your beliefs. But what if I told you that right now, as you're listening to this, there are messages being planted into your mind? Messages you'll never consciously notice, yet they'll still influence your decisions. Subliminal messaging isn't some sci-fi idea. It's real, it's powerful, and it's been used for decades to influence people without them ever realizing it. One of the most famous examples, the 1957 Coca-Cola experiment, a marketing researcher named James Vickery said he flashed the words, "Drink Coca-Cola and eat popcorn" during a movie. The messages appeared for just a tiny fraction of a second, too fast for people to notice consciously, but just enough for the subconscious mind to catch it. He later claimed snack sales shot up. People freaked out. They were afraid they were being hypnotized into buying things they didn't even want. Later, Vickery admitted he faked the results. But the idea itself wasn't false. Since then, advertisers, political campaigns, and even intelligence agencies have tested subliminal tricks because they work. At its heart, subliminal messaging is all about getting past your critical thinking. Your conscious mind blocks out most things, but your subconscious takes everything in. When an image, a phrase, or an idea is repeated in a subtle way, it sneaks into your mind without resistance. And then later, when it's time to make a decision, you'll feel a strange pull toward a certain option because it was planted there earlier. One way this is done through hidden images and ads. Fast food brands have been caught using visual tricks, shapes, symbols, and even secret words to make food seem more tempting. Political ads use colors and background music to stir emotions that nudge you toward a certain opinion. Even social media algorithms are part of it, showing you things in a way that gently pushes your beliefs in a certain direction. But it gets worse. Subliminal messaging isn't just about what you see, it's also about what you hear. Some sounds played at very low or high frequencies in music or commercials can affect how you feel. Low sounds might make you feel uneasy. High ones can make you feel excited or in a rush. Ever walked into a store and suddenly felt like you wanted to stay and shop longer? That could be carefully designed background music, created to keep your brain interested and make you buy more. Then there's something called priming. You see something small, like a word, an image, or a color, without realizing how it affects you. Later, when you're in a related situation, your brain fills in the blanks and pushes you toward an outcome that was set up earlier. Casinos do this all the time. Bright lights, the sound of machines paying out, no windows, no clocks. All of it is planned to make you lose track of time and keep spending. But maybe the scariest thing about subliminal messaging is how it's part of normal life. News outlets use certain words to shape the way stories feel. Social media platforms show you things that fit your beliefs to keep you hooked. Even in personal relationships, people can use quiet reinforcement to slowly change how their partner sees the world. So here's the big question. How much of your thinking is actually yours? How many choices have you made that were shaped by someone else without you knowing it? The scariest part of subliminal messaging isn't that it's real. It's that you may never know when it's happening. Number 39, neurolinguistic programming, NLP. Ever had a conversation where someone seemed to guide your thoughts without you noticing? Where, before you even realize it, you were nodding along, agreeing, and trusting their words? That wasn't an accident. That was a technique. It's called neurolinguistic programming, or NLP. It's a group of psychological tricks, so subtle and so effective that entire industries use them. NLP is all about shaping how people think, feel, and behave using words and subconscious cues. It works by picking up on patterns in how people talk, move, and think. Then, it gently steers them toward a specific outcome. Used in a good way, people say NLP helps with communication, confidence, and persuasion. But in the wrong hands, it becomes a tool for manipulation, lying, and even control. One of the most known tricks, the embedded command. This is when someone hides a command inside a normal sounding sentence. Instead of saying, "You should trust me," they might say, "You might not even notice it yet, but you're already starting to trust what I'm saying." The suggestion gets through. Your mind hears it without putting up a fight. Another NLP trick is mirroring. When someone copies your body language, tone, or energy level, your brain feels like they're familiar. And so you trust them without knowing why. Cult leaders use this to build connection. High-pressure salespeople use it to lower your guard. It's why you sometimes feel instantly close to someone you've just met. But the most chilling NLP trick is anchoring. This is when someone connects a feeling with a certain word, gesture, or cue. If someone always makes you feel safe when they say a specific phrase, your brain links that feeling to them. Later, even if they lie to you, that same phrase will trigger trust. What makes NLP dangerous is that it works so well and you won't even notice it's being done to you. Number 40, pacing and leading. Ever met someone who just gets you, who says all the right things? Makes you feel seen and seems to truly understand you? You trust them, maybe you even follow their advice because it feels natural. But what if that wasn't just a connection? What if it was designed? That's called pacing and leading. A psychological method used to influence people without them noticing. First, the person matches how you think, feel, or act. That's the pacing. Then once you feel understood, they gently lead you toward the outcome they want. If done right, it makes people agree, follow, or obey without resistance. Think about cult leaders, con artists, or politicians. They start by matching the audience's anger or pain. I know how you feel. You've been ignored. You've been hurt. That's pacing, showing they get your reality. Then comes the leading, and that's why you need to listen to me. I have the answer. Follow me. This technique shows up in daily life too. Salespeople repeat your worries back to you, then lead you to a solution. Interrogators match your tone and mood, then guide your answers. Even in personal relationships, someone might agree with your emotions first, then slowly shape your choices. And here's why it's dangerous. It feels natural. The manipulation doesn't feel forced. It feels comforting. You think you're deciding for yourself, but really your path has been set. Number 41, anchoring bias exploitation. How much would you pay for a cup of coffee? $10? $5? $1? Whatever number popped into your head first, it probably wasn't random. It was anchored to something, maybe the price at your favorite cafe, or maybe the $10 I just said. But here's the thing, your sense of value, fairness, and even reality can be hijacked by a simple mental trick called anchoring bias. And the worst part is, you won't even notice it happening. Let's look at a classic example. Imagine you walk into a store and see a high-end watch priced at $10,000. That sounds insane, right? But next to it, there's another watch for $2,000. Suddenly, that second one doesn't seem so bad. because your brain just got anchored to the first higher price. Even if you weren't planning to buy anything, the comparison makes the second one feel reasonable, but in reality, it's still way overpriced. And this isn't just a sales trick, it's everywhere. Ever notice how some restaurant menus include a couple of dishes that are ridiculously expensive? Those aren't meant to sell, they're there just to make everything else on the menu seem cheaper by comparison. Marketers, salespeople, even politicians use anchoring to quietly shape how you see information. But it goes deeper than just money. Anchoring can also be used to change your beliefs, emotions, and decisions. Imagine you're negotiating your salary for a new job. The company throws out a number that's way below what you expected. You push back. And they raise it just a little. Now, instead of thinking about what you should be earning, you're negotiating based on the low number they planted in your head. That's anchoring. And it gets worse. Anchoring can even be used to distort reality itself. Let's say a news report tells you that crime in your city has gone up by 300%. Sounds terrifying, but what if they don't tell you what the numbers were before? Maybe there was one case last year and now there are 4. But that big percentage number is the anchor. It makes you feel unsafe. It changes how urgent the problem feels. And all it took was one number. Now think about relationships. Have you ever had a conversation where someone subtly sets a standard? Like what's normal in a relationship or how much effort one person should be putting in? They might say things like, "You're overreacting. This is totally fine." Even if you disagree, your mind starts adjusting to that idea. Over time, something that once felt wrong becomes normal. That's the danger of anchoring bias. It works because our brains need something to compare things to. We don't judge things in isolation. We compare them to the first number, first idea, or first emotion we come across. And once that anchor is in place, breaking free from it is almost impossible. The smartest manipulators don't try to control all your decisions. They just control your first impression. Because once the anchor is set, every choice you make will fall right where they want it to. Number 42, reframing failure. Reframing failure is one of the most quiet but powerful psychological tricks. It changes how you see your own mistakes, turning them into something much heavier, a reflection of your worth, a sign that you're not good enough. When failure is framed this way, it doesn't feel like a bump in the road, it feels like proof that you're broken. And once that belief takes root, it starts to control your entire life. Imagine growing up in an environment where every little mistake isn't just a mistake. It's a sign that something is wrong with you. You didn't just fail a test, you let your parents down. You didn't just mess up a project, you embarrassed yourself in front of your boss. Reframing failure means changing what failure means. So instead of being something you learn from, it becomes a personal flaw. And once you believe that, someone else can control you completely. Take North Korea, for example. Their failure isn't seen as personal. It's seen as betrayal. If you don't meet a work quota, you're not just a lazy worker. You're failing the country, your family, and your leader. That kind of pressure forces people into submission. Now, their failures affect everyone, and that guilt traps them. But this kind of manipulation doesn't just happen in extreme regimes. It happens at work. It happens in relationships. It happens in day-to-day life. Have you ever worked for a boss who made you feel like every little error meant you weren't good enough for the job? That's not just feedback. That's reframing. Instead of seeing failure as growth, it's framed as proof you don't belong. The more this happens, the more scared people get. Scared to speak up, scared to take chances, even scared to leave a toxic job. Because it's not just about failing anymore. It's about believing that you're the failure. And this happens in relationships too. A manipulative partner might say things like, "See, you always mess things up." Maybe you're just not cut out for love. Now, you don't just feel bad, you start to believe that you are bad. And when that belief sets in, it becomes easy for someone to control you. One of the darkest parts of this trick is how it convinces people they deserve the life they're stuck in. If someone can make you believe that failure defines who you are, you won't even try to leave. You'll stay in bad jobs, toxic relationships, or unhealthy environments. Not because you want to, but because you've been made to believe that leaving will just lead to more failure. And since failure is now tied to your identity, you avoid it at all costs. The scariest part, most people don't even know it's happening. They blame themselves. They shrink. They try harder. They stay quiet. But here's the truth. Failure is not who you are. It's not permanent. And it's never defined by someone else. Because if someone else controls what failure means to you, they might just control you too. Number 43, cognitive dissonance amplification. People will defend something even when it's clearly wrong. Even when it's hurting them. Even when reality is screaming at them to walk away. This isn't just stubbornness. It's a psychological trap called cognitive dissonance. It's what happens when someone holds two opposing beliefs at the same time, and it creates a deep, painful discomfort. We're wired to fix that discomfort, but instead of changing the belief, we often change how we see reality. Imagine being loyal to a leader, a relationship, or a cause, only to discover it's harmful or fake. The logical thing would be to walk away. But most people don't. Instead, they double down. They defend it. They twist the facts to keep believing, because admitting the truth would mean admitting they wasted time, energy, or even their identity on a lie, and that's too hard to face. Take the Heaven's Gate cult. Members believed they'd ascend to another life on a spaceship if they followed their leader, Marshall Applewhite. When their prediction failed, when the spaceship never came, they didn't question it. Instead, their faith got stronger. They convinced themselves it was a test. And the more they gave up for the group, the harder it became to leave, because leaving would mean admitting they were wrong about everything. So they stayed until it led to mass suicide in 1997. But this isn't just about cults. This trick is everywhere, and the key to it is escalation. A manipulator starts small, asking you to accept one little contradiction, something that feels wrong but not wrong enough to leave. A toxic boss asks you to cover for a shady decision, just once. You do it. You tell yourself, I need this job. But next time, the request is bigger. And before you know it, you're part of a system you once would have rejected. It happens in relationships too. A partner starts with tiny manipulations, subtle gaslighting. You begin doubting yourself. You start thinking, maybe it's my fault. Each time you excuse the behavior, you sink deeper, and the more you justify staying, the harder it is to leave. Because leaving would mean admitting you stayed in something toxic, and that truth hurts more than the lie. And it's not just individuals, whole societies fall for this. People invest in political or ideological movements, then those movements become corrupt. But instead of rejecting them, people defend them. They bend logic to protect their belief because admitting they were wrong feels worse than continuing the lie. So how do you escape? First, notice when your brain is fighting reality. Ask yourself, am I defending this because I truly believe it or because I don't want to admit I was wrong? Second, create distance. When you're too emotionally attached, you can't think clearly. Step back. Look at the facts without the weight of your pride or pain. Cognitive dissonance is natural. But when manipulators amplify it, they can trap you in a reality that isn't real. And the worst part, the more you argue that you're right, the deeper you fall into the trap. The only way out? Stop fighting, start questioning. Number 44, the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. Have you ever noticed that the moment you learn about something, it suddenly starts showing up everywhere? You hear a strange phrase for the first time, and then it pops up in every conversation. You see a rare car on the street, and now it seems to be parked on every corner. It's not magic. It's not a conspiracy, it's actually a psychological trick your own brain is playing on you. And yes, it can be used against you. This is called the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, also known as frequency illusion. Once your brain locks onto a new idea, it starts paying more attention to it, even though it was always there before. The information isn't new, but your brain is now tuned in to notice it, which makes it feel like the world around you is suddenly changing. Now here's where it turns dark. This mental shortcut can be used to manipulate what you believe, how you think, and even how you act without you realizing it. Let's say someone wants to spread a message or control a story. They don't start by shouting it at you, they slip it in quietly. Maybe you catch a tweet, maybe you overhear a conversation, maybe you watch a random video that casually mentions it. At first you barely notice, but then you start seeing it everywhere, on news headlines, in social media posts, in people's conversations, and suddenly it feels like everyone is talking about it. Like it must be true. Like it's everywhere. But it's not. It's just your brain being tricked, your reality being shaped without your permission. Marketers do this all the time. A brand will make sure you come across their name several times a day so it feels more popular or trustworthy than it really is. Politicians use it too. They repeat the same phrase over and over again until it feels like a shared belief. Cult leaders? They know how to plant a single idea in your mind and then reinforce it so often that eventually it becomes impossible to ignore. The Baader-Meinhof effect makes it frighteningly easy to reshape your view of reality. And the scariest part is this, it doesn't even feel like you're being manipulated. It feels natural. It feels like you're the one connecting the dots. Like the world is showing you a truth that's been hidden all along. That's what makes it dangerous. So the next time something starts showing up everywhere, stop. Ask yourself, is this really happening? Or is someone making sure you keep seeing it? Number 45, confirmation bias. Now let's talk about something just as sneaky. Confirmation bias. Imagine two people watching the exact same news story. One believes the government is corrupt. The other believes it's doing a great job. And yet, both walk away from the news more convinced than ever that they're right. How does that happen? Because each person only noticed the parts of the story that supported what they already believed. That's confirmation bias, your brain's built-in filter that makes you see only what you want to see while ignoring everything else. Now here's where it gets dark. Once someone understands how this works, they can use it to trap you inside your own beliefs. Take cults, for example. They don't try to prove everything they say is true, they simply feed you ideas you already sort of believe. If you're frustrated with the world, they won't argue. They'll amplify your frustration. They'll show you only the stories, images, or people that make you angrier at society, and over time you stop questioning, you only accept the information that supports what they want you to think. This same trick is used in politics. Have you ever wondered why people fall into echo chambers, where everyone around them seems to agree with their views? It's because reinforcing a belief is more powerful than trying to change it. And social media is built on this idea. If you click on one article that agrees with your opinion, the algorithm shows you more just like it, again and again, until it seems like everyone must think the same way you do. And anything that disagrees with you, it's filtered out before you even see it. It doesn't stop there. Look at conspiracy theories. When someone believes the earth is flat, any proof that says otherwise is seen as a lie. Try to argue and they'll only double down. Because their brain isn't just ignoring the truth, it's fighting against it. Even scammers and marketers use this. They don't try to convince you their product works. They find people who already believe it might work and give them just enough proof to make it feel real. A few testimonials, some cherry-picked results, emotional stories. That's all it takes to make your brain focus only on the positives and ignore the negatives. This happens in relationships too. A toxic partner doesn't try to seem perfect. Instead, they feed your existing fears, your doubts, your insecurities, your abandonment issues. They twist situations so that everything you see confirms what you already fear. See, everyone leaves you eventually. Over time, your brain gets so used to this that it stops noticing anything that doesn't fit the story. You stop seeing reality clearly. Confirmation bias doesn't just help you ignore the truth, it makes you defend lies. Once you fall into it, it's set. Even facts that are clearly true feel like an attack. People don't just believe false ideas, they protect them, because admitting they're wrong feels like a personal threat. That's why the best manipulators don't try to argue with you, they don't need to show you evidence or force you to believe something. They just control what information you see, and once that happens, they don't need to change your mind. You'll do it for them. Number 46, framing effect. Now let's talk about the framing effect, another powerful trick. Imagine you walk into a store and see yogurt that says 90% fat-free. Sounds healthy, right? But the one next to it says contains 10% fat. Suddenly, that one doesn't sound so good, even though they're exactly the same. That's the framing effect. It doesn't change the facts, just how the facts are presented. And that small change can completely shift the way you feel and what you decide. You might be thinking, okay, so it's just marketing? But framing goes far beyond product labels. It shapes political opinions, changes public perception, and even manipulates your emotions, all without changing the actual information. Here's a famous example. Imagine there's a new policy to fight a deadly disease. If people are told the policy will save 200 lives, they're more likely to support it than if they're told 400 people will die. Same math. Very different emotional reaction. Framing doesn't just work with numbers, it works with morality too. Take a controversial issue. One group calls themselves pro-life, the other calls themselves pro-choice. Notice how both names sound positive. No one wants to be labeled anti-life or anti-choice. Just by picking the right name, the issue is framed in a way that makes it emotionally easier to support. Framing helps control how we feel before we even think. Look at the news. Imagine two headlines describing the same event. Protesters demand justice in the streets. Rioting mobs wreak havoc in the city. Same group, same situation, but depending on the wording, you'll either feel sympathy or fear. This is how the media, governments, and companies push an agenda without lying. They don't need to change the truth. They just need to frame it so that you react the way they want. Once they control the frame, they control your reaction. It gets worse in personal relationships. Ever had someone say, "I'm sorry you feel that way," instead of "I'm sorry for what I did"? That's framing. It shifts the blame from them to you for reacting. Or imagine a toxic partner saying, "I'm just trying to help," instead of "I'm trying to control you." Same behavior, different frame. One makes them look caring, the other exposes their manipulation. Once a frame is set, it's very hard to escape. If someone introduces you to a person by saying, "He's trouble," you'll view everything that person does through that lens. If a company convinces you their product is luxury, you'll be more willing to pay extra, even if the quality is no different from something cheaper. Framing doesn't twist the facts, it twists your perspective. And once someone controls how you see the world, they don't need to tell you what to do, you'll do it on your own. Number 47, the Pygmalion effect. Imagine a teacher walks into a classroom already believing that half the students are geniuses and the other half are just average. Nobody tells the students anything. No one gets special treatment. But by the end of the year, the genius group performs way better than the others. Why? Because expectations alone shape reality. This is called the Pygmalion effect. And when used intentionally, it can shape people like clay, without them even noticing. The name comes from the Greek myth of Pygmalion, a sculptor who fell in love with a statue he carved, and that statue came to life. In psychology, it refers to how our beliefs influence how people behave. When someone expects great things from you, you subconsciously rise to meet those expectations. But the opposite also happens. When people expect little from you, failure can begin before you even try. There's a famous real-world example, the Rosenthal and Jacobson experiment from the 1960s. Researchers told teachers that certain students, randomly chosen, were expected to bloom intellectually and do really well. The teachers, without realizing it, treated these students differently. They gave them more encouragement, were more patient, and gave off subtle signals that they believed in them. By the end of the year, those students had actually become smarter. They scored much higher on IQ tests. Now think about how dangerous this can become when used to manipulate. A controlling boss may keep suggesting you're not capable, making you doubt your own skills until you actually start underperforming. A toxic partner might keep telling you you're lucky to have them, slowly destroying your confidence so you never think of leaving. Even entire groups in society can be shaped by this. If people are always told they're inferior, they may start to believe it and act like it. The Pygmalion effect isn't just about beliefs, it's about how expectations shape our futures. And the scariest part, it happens so slowly and quietly you don't even realize it's controlling you until it's too late. Number 48, the Zeigarnik effect. Ever notice how an unfinished task just sticks in your mind like an itch you can't scratch? Like a song that cuts off before the final chorus? Or a movie that ends right before the climax? It's frustrating. Your brain refuses to let it go. That's the Zeigarnik effect. And it's one of the most sinister psychological tricks ever discovered. Now imagine if someone used that feeling against you on purpose. What if they left things unresolved just to keep you anxious, distracted, and craving closure? This isn't just a weird brain quirk. It's a tool of manipulation used everywhere, from advertising to emotional control. The effect is named after Bluma Zeigarnik, a Soviet psychologist. She noticed something strange while watching waiters in a cafe. They could remember every detail of unpaid orders, but the moment the bill was settled, they forgot it completely. In other words, the brain puts a spotlight on unfinished business. Loose ends demand our attention. Advertisers use this constantly. Think about cliffhangers in TV shows. Why does every episode end just when things get exciting? Because our brains can't handle incompleteness. We get stuck on it. We crave resolution. That's why people binge entire seasons. They're not just entertained. They're trapped. But here's where it gets dark. The Zeigarnik effect is also used to control people. Cult leaders, manipulative partners, even interrogators will purposely leave things unresolved. Conversations, promises, threats, so their targets stay mentally hooked. A toxic boss might keep teasing a promotion that never comes. A narcissist might leave a conversation mid-sentence, making you desperate to finish it. A politician might create fear and confusion, but never offer real solutions. They all use the same trick. Leave the brain hanging, and it will chase the answer forever. And the worst part, most people don't even know what's happening. Number 49, loss aversion. Let's say you're given two options. Option A, you gain $100. Option B, you lose $100. Which one feels stronger? If you're like most people, the pain of losing $100 hits much harder than the joy of gaining it. That's loss aversion. It's a psychological trick that makes us fear loss way more than we enjoy winning. And that fear, it controls more of your choices than you think. Casinos know this trick inside and out. When you win, the lights flash, music blares, and your brain gets a shot of excitement. But when you lose, silence. No sounds, no alarms, because they know you're already in pain. And here's the twist. People who lose money don't usually walk away. They try to win it back. They chase their losses, not to get ahead, but to avoid the pain of having lost. Loss aversion doesn't just affect the gamblers. It shapes marketing, relationships, and even politics. Ever notice how companies offer limited time deals? Or how shopping websites say, only 2 left in stock? That's your brain panicking. You might not even need the product, but the moment it feels like it's slipping away, you feel like you have to get it. In toxic relationships, loss aversion is often weaponized. Manipulators don't make you fear what they give you. They make you fear what they might take away. They plant the idea that without them, you'll be alone, unloved, or even worse off. That's why people stay in harmful situations. It's not because they're happy. That's why people stay in harmful situations. It's not because they're happy, it's because the idea of losing what they have, no matter how bad, feels more terrifying than walking away. And if you think this doesn't affect you, think again. Every day, politicians, advertisers, and even social media platforms use the same principle. Act now or miss out. Your rights are being taken away. Everyone else is ahead of you. The world doesn't just offer you choices. It makes you terrified of choosing the wrong one. So ask yourself, how many of your choices were truly yours, and how many were just an attempt to avoid loss? Number 50, the power of playing dumb. There's a saying, never underestimate the power of a fool. But what if the fool isn't really a fool at all? What if playing dumb is a carefully crafted tactic, a way to control situations, lower defenses, and gain the upper hand without anyone noticing? The power of playing dumb is one of the most underrated psychological tricks. But it's been used for centuries by politicians, criminals, and everyday manipulators. One famous example is the detective Columbo. With his messy clothes and slow, confused way of talking, suspects always underestimated him. But by the end, he would catch them in their own contradictions. That's how this trick works. When you appear clueless, people let their guard down. They talk too much. They feel like they're in control. So how does this actually work? First, acting dumb makes you look harmless. Someone who seems confused doesn't look like a threat. That makes people step in, take charge, and relax around you. And that gives the fool the perfect position to gather information without suspicion. People will over-explain, fill in gaps, and accidentally reveal things they normally wouldn't. Then there's something called selective incompetence, pretending not to know how to do something so others have to do it for you. Employees use this all the time. Someone might act like they don't know how to make a presentation, cook a meal, or fix a computer. They could do it, but by pretending, they get someone else to take over. It's a subtle form of control. It makes others take on more work, more stress, more responsibility without even realizing it. This trick also shows up in social situations. Ever notice how some people pretend to misunderstand things just to avoid taking the blame? They act confused when caught in a lie. They say things like, "Oh, I didn't know that's what you meant," or "I must have misunderstood." This makes the other person second guess themselves. They start to feel like they're being unfair, like maybe they misunderstood too. And just like that, the manipulator slips away from accountability. But the darkest side of playing dumb is how exhausting it is for the other person. Imagine trying to explain something over and over to someone who pretends they just don't get it. The more you try to clarify, the more they act confused. Eventually, you give up. You're drained, frustrated, and maybe even doubting your own clarity. This is psychological warfare. It traps the victim in a mental loop, trying to fix something that was never broken, just manipulated. In politics, this trick is used to dodge responsibility. Leaders claim they weren't informed or say they don't recall what happened. It buys them time, shifts blame, and creates doubt. Meanwhile, their critics waste energy proving something that should have been obvious. At its core, the power of playing dumb is all about control. It uses confusion as a weapon. It makes people feel safe while slowly turning them into tools. It drains others of energy, while the manipulator quietly gets exactly what they want. So remember, just because someone looks lost doesn't mean they are. Sometimes the one pretending not to know the way is actually the one leading you exactly where they want you to go. Number 51, the halo effect. First impressions are powerful. But what if I told you they don't just affect how we feel about someone, they change how we see everything about them? That's the halo effect. A psychological trick so subtle and so manipulative, it can make someone appear smarter, kinder, or more trustworthy than they really are, just because of one single positive trait. And once that halo is in place, it's incredibly hard to see past it. Imagine you're sitting in a courtroom watching two people on trial for the same crime. One is sharply dressed, speaks clearly, and carries themselves with confidence. The other is messy, nervous, and avoids eye contact. You don't know anything about the actual case, so who seems more guilty? Studies show that confident, attractive people are more likely to be seen as innocent. Meanwhile, those who look anxious or less polished are assumed to be guilty. Even when the evidence says otherwise, that's the halo effect in action. It works because the human brain is wired for shortcuts. Instead of carefully analyzing everything about someone, we grab onto one standout feature, like good looks, charm, or confidence, and assume the rest of them must match. If they're attractive, they must also be kind. If they sound smart, they must be right. If they have power, they must have earned it. It's the reason politicians can win elections based more on charisma than on policies. It's how manipulators get away with lies. It's why leaders who appear bold and commanding are often followed blindly, even when their actions raise red flags. The halo effect doesn't just change perception, it reshapes reality. Take media coverage. For example, When a beloved celebrity is caught in a scandal, they're given the benefit of the doubt. But someone the public already dislikes, they're instantly judged and condemned, whether it's fair or not.
Marketers exploit the halo effect with precision. That's why luxury brands use attractive, stylish models in their ads. It's not just to sell a watch or a pair of shoes. They want you to connect the product to status,
Beauty and success. So when you buy it, you're not just buying the item, you're buying the feeling around it. But the darker side of this effect is how it protects people who should be questioned. Charismatic leaders can hide corruption behind charm. Toxic partners can get away with manipulation because they seem sweet at first. Even some of the most dangerous figures in history masked their intentions with an image of strength and confidence until it was too late. The halo effect is dangerous because it doesn't just fool us. It convinces us we're right to be fooled. And once someone believes the illusion, they'll defend it, even when the facts say otherwise. He's a good guy. He wouldn't do that. She's so charming. She must be telling the truth. Breaking free from the halo effect means pushing past that first impression. It means asking, what am I not seeing? What am I ignoring because someone seems impressive? Because sometimes the people who shine the brightest are just casting the longest shadows. Number 52, time constraints. Picture yourself in a high-end watch store admiring a beautiful, expensive timepiece. The salesperson leans in and whispers, "This is the last one in stock, and I can only hold this price for the next 5 minutes." Suddenly, your heart races. You weren't planning to buy anything today, but now waiting feels like losing. This is the time constraint trick, a pressure tactic that's wildly effective. It gets people to act fast and often against their better judgment. When a countdown starts, rational thinking is the first thing to go. Your brain reacts to limited time as a threat, like scarcity. You fear missing out. You fear losing a rare chance that may never come back. Your body responds by releasing cortisol, your stress hormone. It floods your system, makes your thoughts race, and creates a false sense of urgency. Suddenly, pausing feels risky. Acting fast feels like the only safe option. Marketers, scammers, and even cult leaders know this all too well. By faking urgency, they create such intense pressure that you feel forced to act before you can think clearly. This works because of something called decision fatigue. When you feel rushed, your brain doesn't have time to weigh pros and cons. So it defaults to instinct, the safest, simplest, most familiar option. And often, that just happens to be exactly what the manipulator wants. It's why limited time offers sell so well, why car dealerships say a deal ends today, even though the same exclusive deal will still be there next week. But this tactic isn't just used to sell you products, it's been used to control people on a massive scale. In high-stakes negotiations, leaders create last-minute deadlines to force rushed agreements. Cults pressure new recruits with ultimatums: join today or miss out forever. Even military interrogators use time constraints, hammering suspects with rapid questions before they can think straight. One of the scariest uses of this trick, online scams. Think about those urgent emails claiming to be from your bank or a government agency. Your account is compromised. You have 10 minutes to respond or your funds will be frozen. Rationally, you check the source. You take your time. But with a countdown ticking in your head, fear takes over. And before you realize it, you've handed over sensitive information. Here's the terrifying part. Urgency creates compliance. People who usually resist manipulation become highly suggestible under time pressure. Research shows that when we think we're on a deadline, we're far more likely to follow instructions, even if those instructions go against our morals, instincts, or common sense. So how do you fight back? The key is simple. Pause. The moment you feel pressured, step back, take a breath, ask yourself, is this really my last chance? Or is someone making me feel that way? Because the truth is, if someone's rushing you to decide right now, it's usually because they don't want you to think at all. Number 53, the power of touch. A firm handshake, a quick pat on the back, a gentle brush on the arm, these small, almost invisible gestures might seem harmless, even meaningless. But what if I told you they can control your thoughts, influence your decisions, and shift how you feel without you ever realizing it? This is the power of touch. A psychological weapon so subtle, most people don't even notice it's being used. Yet it can change behavior in ways that are nearly impossible to resist. Take a study in a restaurant. Waiters were told to lightly touch customers on the arm or shoulder as they handed back change. The result? Their tips increased by up to 40%. Another study tested job interviews. Candidates who got a brief but confident handshake were rated as more competent, even when their answers weren't any better than others. Why? Because touch goes deeper than words. It's our oldest form of communication. Before we spoke, we used touch to bond, to comfort, to show trust, or dominance. And even now, long after language has evolved, those ancient instincts still live in us. When someone touches you lightly, especially in a friendly, non-threatening way, it creates instant familiarity. Even if you don't consciously notice it, your brain does. It reads that contact as warmth, connection, even authority. That's why doctors who touch your arm while giving a diagnosis are more likely to be trusted. Why politicians shake as many hands as they can. Why salespeople gently tap your elbow during a pitch. And here's where it gets dark. This trick works even when you don't want it to. Studies show that even unwanted touch, if it's subtle and non-aggressive, can make people more likely to say yes, more likely to comply, and less likely to resist. Con artists use this constantly. A scammer may accidentally brush against you while talking. Your brain starts to associate them with trust. A cult leader might rest a hand on your shoulder while giving you a message. Suddenly, it feels like they're being personal and caring. Even in business or politics, you'll see powerful people placing a hand on someone's back as they walk through a door. It looks like a friendly gesture, but really it's about control. They're guiding the other person, literally showing who's in charge, and the person being touched often doesn't even realize they're following. Here's the most unsettling part. Knowing about this trick doesn't make you immune. Even now, after hearing all of this, your brain is still wired to respond to touch the way it always has. The next time someone rests a hand on your arm or gives you a firm handshake, your mind may still read it as connection, confidence, or authority. You might question it later, but in the moment, your defenses are already lowered. So the next time you feel a hand on your shoulder, a brush on your arm, or a warmth in a handshake, ask yourself, was that just casual contact? Or was it a calculated move to make you just a little more obedient? Number 54, the decoy effect. The next time you buy something, pause and really think. Did you actually choose it, or were you led to it? Because what if I told you that many of your decisions weren't entirely yours, but carefully influenced by a trick called the decoy effect? This psychological tactic is subtle, clever, and incredibly effective. It's used by corporations, advertisers, and even political strategists to steer your choices without you even noticing. Here's how it works. You're given 3 options, but one of them isn't really meant to be picked. It's just there to make one of the other options look better, pushing you toward the choice they want you to make. And once you see this trick in action, you'll start to question a lot of decisions you thought were entirely your own. Let's break it down with a simple example. You walk into a movie theater and see 2 choices at the concession stand, a small popcorn for $3 or a large for $7. The $7 one feels like a big jump, so most people hesitate. But now, a third option is added, a medium popcorn for $6. $50, suddenly that large popcorn seems like a fantastic deal. Just 50 cents more for a whole lot more popcorn? Of course you'll pick the large. But here's the thing. You were never meant to pick the medium. It was just bait, a decoy. Placed there only to make the $7 large look irresistible, and this trick is everywhere. You'll find it in subscription plans where the best value sits conveniently between a bare bones basic tier and an overpriced premium one. You'll see it in restaurants where menu pricing is set up to guide you toward a specific dish. And it even shows up in politics where a third-party candidate who has no real chance of winning can still change the entire outcome of an election just by being on the ballot. But here's where it gets darker. The decoy effect doesn't just shape what we buy, it can distort how we see value, quality, and even morality. Ever noticed how a public figure can get away with something awful just because someone else did something even worse? That's the decoy effect again. When a more extreme option is introduced, the original one suddenly seems not so bad, even if it was still unacceptable to begin with. And the most disturbing part, the more you fall for this trick, the more your brain tries to justify it. You tell yourself you made the smartest choice, that your vote was fair, that your judgment wasn't influenced. But in reality, you were nudged, guided, manipulated. So next time you're faced with 3 options, take a closer look, because one of them might not be a real choice at all. It might just be a trap, dressed up to feel like freedom. Number 55, the foot in the mouth effect. Most people believe that being polite and friendly always works in their favor. That small talk and kindness are harmless. But what if I told you that even something as simple as asking, "How are you doing today?" could open the door to manipulation? This is the foot in the mouth effect, a psychological trick that takes advantage of our need to seem kind, consistent, and cooperative. And once someone knows how to use it against you, they can influence your decisions without you ever noticing. One of the clearest examples of this effect comes from a study by social psychologists Howard and Gengler. They discovered that when people were first asked a harmless personal question, like, "How's your day going?" they were much more likely to agree to a request right after, even if that request had nothing to do with the conversation. Why? Because once we say something positive about ourselves, like I'm doing great, we subconsciously want to stay in that mindset. We feel pressure to keep acting friendly and agreeable to match the image we just projected. So if someone asks how you're doing and you respond kindly, you're more likely to say yes when they follow up with a favor or a pitch, even if you didn't plan to. This tactic is everywhere. Salespeople use it constantly. They won't start with a hard sell. They'll start with small talk, a comment about the weather, a compliment, a simple, how are you? The moment you respond warmly, you've unknowingly set a trap for yourself. You feel the need to keep being pleasant and cooperative. So when they ask if you'll just take a quick look or hear them out, you say yes. Not because you wanted to, but because now it feels rude to say no. But it goes far beyond sales. Interrogators and intelligence agents use the same approach. They begin with harmless, casual questions to get the subject talking. Once someone starts engaging positively, they naturally want to stay cooperative. That makes them easier to guide, easier to manipulate, easier to control. It's a psychological doorway, and once you step through it, it's hard to turn around without feeling like you're contradicting yourself. Why does this happen? Because humans are wired for consistency. Once we say something out loud, especially about ourselves, we feel a powerful internal pressure to act in ways that match those words. We want to seem honest, polite, and emotionally stable. Social norms push us to avoid looking fake or hypocritical. If you say, I'm doing great, and someone then asks for help, saying no feels like admitting you were lying or being unkind, even if you never wanted to help in the first place. This trick even works on a larger scale. Political campaigns and propaganda use it all the time. They begin with broad, agreeable statements like, we all want a better future. Of course you'll agree. But that one little yes can be used to guide you toward policies or positions you didn't originally support. The moment people align with a small idea, they're more likely to go along with bigger ones, just to stay consistent with themselves. So how do you protect yourself? It starts with awareness. If a conversation starts with warm, friendly questions and quickly leads into a request, pause. Just because you said something nice doesn't mean you owe anyone anything. Politeness is not a contract. Don't let your own words be used against you. Because the foot in the mouth effect doesn't just manipulate what you say, it bends what you do to match it. And that's how a simple, I'm good thanks can turn into a yes you never meant to give. Number 56, the IKEA effect. Why do people hold on to messy crafts they made in childhood, or cherish a clumsy school project, or feel proud of a poorly built bookshelf they assembled themselves? It's not the quality, it's the effort. This is the IKEA effect, a psychological trick that makes people overvalue things they've worked on themselves, even if the result is flawed or underwhelming. The name comes from the furniture giant IKEA, which sells flat pack furniture you assemble at home. At first glance, this looks like a clever way to save money. But there's a deeper reason it works so well. By making you build the product yourself, IKEA taps into a powerful psychological bias. When you put effort into something, you care about it more. Studies show that when people build something, even if it's simple or poorly made, they value it significantly more than something that's already put together. It makes the object feel more personal, more meaningful. And that makes people less likely to question its flaws, return it, or throw it away. But this trick doesn't stop at furniture. It's used in workplaces where employees are encouraged to contribute ideas or take ownership of projects, making them feel deeply invested in a company that underpays or overworks them. It's used in toxic relationships where one partner makes the other work hard for approval, attention, or basic affection, deepening the emotional bond and making it harder to leave. And it's used in cults, where new members are forced to complete difficult, humiliating, or time-consuming tasks. The more effort they put in, the more they cling to the group, even if the beliefs make no sense. The IKEA effect creates a psychological trap. The more energy, time, or emotion you pour into something, the harder it is to walk away, even when your rational mind knows you should. It's why gamblers keep playing after losing money. Why people stay in bad relationships, why workers remain loyal to companies that don't value them. The brain says, I've put in so much already. It must be worth it. But sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's just sunk effort. And here's the scariest part. This effect can shape entire belief systems, political ideologies, conspiracy theories, cult movements. Once someone has put years of thought, identity, and belief into something, it becomes almost impossible to let go. Even if the truth is staring them in the face, they'd rather warp reality than admit their investment was wasted. So how do you break free? You start by asking the hard question, do I truly value this thing? Or do I just not want to let go because I've put so much into it? Because sometimes walking away doesn't mean losing value, it means freeing yourself from something that only feels valuable because it took so much from you. Number 57, the contrast principle. Imagine walking into a store to buy a new suit. The salesperson greets you with a friendly smile and immediately shows you the most expensive suit in the place. A designer one that's way beyond your budget. You quickly shake your head and say it's too much. So they show you a second suit, still expensive, but much cheaper than the first. Suddenly, the second suit feels like a good deal. You start thinking it's reasonable and even convince yourself it's a smart purchase. What just happened? You've experienced the contrast principle, a psychological trick that changes the way we see value based on comparisons. It makes things feel better or worse depending on what they're placed next to. This happens because our brains rarely judge things by themselves. We judge things by comparison. A $100 shirt feels ridiculously expensive if you've just been looking at $20 shirts. But if you've just seen a $500 jacket, that same $100 shirt suddenly feels affordable. The shift in perception happens instantly and often without you realizing it. That's why the contrast principle is one of the most effective persuasion tools around. Salespeople, marketers, real estate agents, even tough negotiators use it all the time. Think about luxury car dealerships. They often show you the most expensive models first on purpose. After seeing a $100,000 car, a $60,000 one starts to feel like a deal, even though it's still very expensive. But here's where it gets darker. This isn't just used in sales. It's used to manipulate behavior, influence decisions, and even shape how we judge people. Imagine a company introduces a terrible new policy. Longer hours, fewer benefits. Employees get upset, they push back. Then management offers a compromise, a slightly less terrible policy. Now employees feel relieved and accept the new terms, even though they're still much worse than before. The catch? That second option was the real goal all along. The first one was just there to make it look better by comparison. This same tactic is used in politics and media. A government might propose a law in its most extreme form. People react with outrage. Then a less extreme version is introduced. People breathe a sigh of relief and accept it, not because it's good, but because it's better than the first. And just like that, something that would have been rejected becomes accepted. It's even used in relationships. Someone who wants to control or mistreat you might start by being incredibly harsh, overly critical, distant, or cruel. Then one day they give you a small kindness, a compliment, a gift, or just some attention. Because of the contrast, that small kindness feels huge. You feel grateful, even loyal. And that keeps people trapped in toxic relationships that they would have walked away from under normal circumstances. What makes this trick so dangerous is how natural it feels. Your brain genuinely believes the second option is better. It doesn't feel like you're being manipulated. And once the contrast principle is working, it's incredibly hard to see past it, unless you know what's happening. So how do you protect yourself? With awareness. Whenever you're making a decision, ask yourself, am I judging this thing for what it truly is? Or am I being influenced by what came before it? Because the scariest part of the contrast principle isn't just that it's used against you. It's that you might never realize it happened. Number 58, the endowment effect. The endowment effect is one of the most sneaky psychological tricks because it takes advantage of something very personal, our sense of ownership. The moment we feel like we own something, even if only for a little while, we start to believe it's worth more than it actually is. This strange human habit can be used to influence our decisions, our emotions, and even our money in ways most people never notice. Picture this. You walk into a store and a salesperson hands you a fancy-looking pen. Try it out, what they say. You hold it, write with it, and roll it around in your fingers. It starts to feel like yours. Then when they tell you the price, even if it's more than you'd normally spend, it seems reasonable. You never planned to buy a pen today, especially not at that price, but now you want it. Why? Because in your mind, it already belongs to you. That's the endowment effect in action. Simply touching or using something tricks your brain into thinking you own it. And that makes it much harder to let go. But this trick doesn't stop at objects. It's used everywhere. In marketing, in sales, in negotiations. Free trials, test drives, and limited time demos, they work because they create a temporary feeling of ownership before you've even paid for anything. Once something feels like it's yours, giving it up feels like losing a part of yourself. This is why stores let you try out products. It's why software companies give you 7-day trials. It's all meant to trigger that sense of ownership, to make you feel like you already have it. And once that happens, you're more likely to buy. Even worse, this effect shows up with ideas and beliefs. People grow attached to their opinions just because they've held them for a long time. That's why changing someone's mind, even with clear proof, can feel impossible. If someone sees their beliefs as part of who they are, Letting go of them feels like losing part of themselves. It happens in relationships too. People stay in toxic friendships and bad romances, not because they're happy, but because they've put so much time and energy into it. They feel like they've invested too much to walk away. But the truth is, they're clinging to the illusion of value, the same way you might hang on to a cracked old phone that you haven't used in years. And here's where it becomes truly dangerous. Cults, con artists, and manipulative leaders all use the endowment effect. They make people feel like they own their place in the group, their choices, even their suffering. And that feeling makes it incredibly hard to leave. No matter how bad things get, the deeper the investment, the stronger the illusion of value. And the most disturbing part, the endowment effect still works even if you know about it. Being aware doesn't always stop it. Your brain will still fight to hold on to whatever it believes is yours. The only real way to escape is to catch yourself in the moment, to ask, am I valuing this thing because it's truly worth it, or just because I feel like I own it? Because sometimes what feels valuable is nothing more than a carefully placed illusion. Number 60, the placebo effect. They handed you a pill. You took it, swallowed it, and minutes later, the pain started to go away. You felt real relief. Your body responded exactly the way you hoped it would. You hope it would. But what if that pill was just sugar? No medicine, no active ingredients, nothing that could have actually caused the change, except your mind. This is the placebo effect, one of the most powerful and unsettling psychological phenomena ever discovered. It shows us that belief alone can change the body. And while that may sound strange or even magical, the real implications are much darker. Let's start with a famous story. In the 1950s, a man named Mr. Wright was dying of cancer. His doctor, out of hope and desperation, gave him an experimental drug, something thought to be a miracle cure, and almost overnight, Mr. Wright's tumors shrank. He made an incredible recovery. But here's the twist. The drug didn't work. It was a complete failure in medical trials. When Mr. Wright later found out the truth, his cancer returned almost instantly. He died shortly after. The drug hadn't saved him. His belief had. This is how powerful the mind can be. Studies have proven that people given fake painkillers still release real endorphins. Surgeries where doctors only pretend to operate have still led to real physical healing. Even Parkinson's patients have shown improvements just because they thought they were getting real treatment. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. If belief can heal, it can also harm. That darker side is called the nocebo effect, the evil twin of the placebo effect. It works the same way but in reverse. Instead of believing you're getting better, you believe you're getting worse. And your body listens. Give someone a sugar pill and tell them it will make them sick. And it might. Nausea, headaches, even serious illnesses can appear, all triggered by belief. People have felt real pain, vomited, or developed symptoms simply because they expected to. This has been used throughout history. In some cultures, shamans or spiritual leaders curse people to death. And people actually died, not from the curse, but from believing it was real. In modern times, scammers sell fake treatments, making people think they're getting better until it's too late. And in drug trials, patients sometimes suffer side effects, not from the drug itself, but from expecting them to happen. So what does this mean? It means that belief, expectation can control your body more than you think. Your pain, your healing, your sickness, even your recovery could all be shaped by your mind rather than the medicine. And the most chilling question of all, who's been shaping those beliefs?